All right, hello and welcome everybody to CherrySTEM reality check, computing reality check. And what is quantum Darwinism? And just more quantum stuff, really. For those of you who were here last time, we went a little bit into what is quantum computing. What are we talking about when we drop these words like quantum and all the buzzwords?
We're here to burst your quantum bubble.
Yes, that's a thing. What is that?
No, there's so many. They put the label quantum on every
On
fucking
everything?
thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that definitely also sounds familiar, and it probably shouldn't. So
I'm sure it does sound familiar.
let's see. Let's make sure we got our story up on where everybody can view it. As we do have an article that we're going to discuss, but we are also going to add our own information to it. Mostly, though, it is kind of a discussion of an article like we did with a couple of other ones in the past. And we also have a kind of a mix. One is the Quanta magazine, Quantum Darwinism, an idea to explain objective reality passes the first test, is sort of the main story that we'll be focusing on. And then we also have a new article from the Wall Street Journal, which is a reality check on quantum computers that we can't read because it's the Wall Street Journal and they don't give anything out for free. So it essentially kind of goes over what we already covered. The Google's quantum computer, the Google's.
The Google.
The Google and its quantum computer. And so I'm kind of mixing the two articles together. We have the reality check on quantum computers while also talking about quantum Darwinism, and to essentially try to maybe make some sense of what it all is. Like, is it real? Is it bullshit? Are people just, because that was our verdict last time.
It's half
Right.
real, half bullshit, and the parts that are real versus the parts that are bullshit are really difficult to separate.
Right, and there
is a tremendous amount of quantum bullshit. And it's not just the crystal healers that are using quantum as a bullshit buzzword. Okay, there is a tremendous amount of quantum bullshit.
Right, that was essentially a bit of a verdict that we came to last time, is that a lot of the things that use the word quantum are essentially just looking for your investor money and not, offering necessarily all that much. But in October 23rd, or sometime in October, Google has announced, I guess it was the week of Wednesday, the week of October 23rd, achieved a breakthrough in quantum computing, saying it developed an experimental processor that took just minutes to complete a calculation that would take the world's best supercomputer thousands of years. And I already don't believe it because they're using hyperbole, like thousands of years.
Actually, this is the one that's for real.
Oh damn!
Yeah, no, this is the one that's for real.
Oh damn!
But it's a very simple. So, but there's even in the realness of it, there is a little bit of bullshit. There's a drop of bullshit in the real part of this. Okay, so this is the Google quantum supremacy.
What the fuck? I don't like that already.
Quantum supremacy. It's the quantum supremacy announcement. And so by quantum supremacy, what they mean is, I've talked a lot about this already to another group.
That's not this group.
Okay, so I'm like, wait a minute, we didn't already talk about this, did we? Okay.
We did a little bit last time, but it was, mostly just debunking the grandiose claims of quantumness.
Okay.
So no, we definitely didn't talk about the
quantum
supremacy.
The quantum supremacy announcement. Okay, so quantum supremacy, what the fuck does that mean? That means that the only thing it means is that it was finally proven in a way that is more rigorous than any other previous experimental proofs, that a quantum computer can do more than your typical computing methods. In other words, so it's the final first proof. In other words, this entire time we've been talking about quantum computers for years and years and years and years, And like D-Wave, I don't know if people remember back in like 2012, D-Wave came out. It was like, oh, it's a quantum computer. It's the new age of computing. And it didn't do shit. And because it's literally never been proven that there is anything that can be considered quantum computing that would be in any way more valuable than conventional computing methods. And so we're talking about, you know, the way you add together the ones and zeros and how you do those things. Except, here's the thing: by saying ones and zeros, I've already set up the interpretation here wrong, because the fact is, what Google did is what I've been saying for the past fucking, you know, since 2012. Is that you're not going to actually achieve anything with the methodology that they've been claiming would work for quantum computing, and that is basically use the magic woo alternate universes to, you know, do something weird. It's really, that's what it comes down to. They'll say it in a thousand different ways, and it's not, and it's always just use the power of multiple universes, and it's never anything that an engineer would say that
Right.
I could actually use that to do fucking something.
Exactly.
Okay, and so it's always been bullshit to an extent. And what I've said in multiple articles on Quora, etc., is that eventually what's going to happen is that you're going to, when there's all this money thrown at it, and then engineers are finally forced to do something with it, then they're going to come through. And that's what's going to happen. And the only way, the only path, the only opportunity for them to come through on that promise of Google, of quantum computing, is through analog computation. Analog computation is something entirely different than digital computation. Now, of course, it's digital analog hybridization that would have to be done, but we're talking about, so analog computing was something that started way the fuck back in the beginning of you know, the computer revolution, but basically kind of like Betamax and VHR. Eventually it was the availability of digital computing, and also I actually remember there was this patent war between I think it was Motorola and Intel or somebody way back, that kind of decided the methodology of computing, and analog computing got abandoned. But there's a lot I'm going to have to leave out in trying to make you understand that there is a power to ambiguity, and that is, well, I'll have to explain it to some extent. In other words, okay, so why did I just bring up ambiguity? Because analog computing is good for getting a fuzzier answer, and that's kind of been known since the beginning of analog computing, is that you could get a fuzzier answer faster, a less precise answer.
Right.
But it's more than that. It goes back to holography, and it goes back to multi-layered data, being able to compute multiple sets of data that are stacked on top of, not just compute them, but stack them on top of each other in one single place. And that's the thing that most people really have a hard time getting their head around, is being able to understand you have multiple sets of data in one place. And the only real way to get your head around it is to really deeply understand how holograms work, and how the surface is actually storing multiple sets of data that you're, when you're, so let me quickly go back over that one moment, because this is actually really important for all of this.
And we did cover holography, and hopefully I will remember at this point, 15 minutes in, to put up a little card in the top corner that will link to our holography video of CherrySTEM that we did. I will try that. Call me out in the comments if I didn't, please.
So, okay. So, like in a hologram, you think of the image usually, but don't think of the image that comes to your eyes, because what's happening when the image comes to your eyes is that, let's think of a really large sheet, like the size of a wall. When you look at a hologram, a sheet that is a holographic plate, or it's a holographic surface, and you see an image, by looking at that wall, what's actually occurring is light from, let's think about two parts of it. The top left corner and the bottom right corner. There's light bouncing from those corners at an angle that converges on your eye. Okay, and then that's also true of every other place on that screen. It is only by the combination of those things at your eye that you see an image. And that happens by not just adding, but also subtracting. So and that's what it's called, constructive and destructive um, interference. So it is the interference of waves in the air. I mean, not actual oxygen kind of air, but like in space at your eye that is creating an image, which is why that image can be, as you move around the hologram, you can see like you can see around the corner of the hologram, even though what you're looking at is a 2D surface, you can see a 3D image, because what is stored on that surface is all the millions of possible images. It's not an illusion. It is that there are millions of images stored in one place on that. And that's why when you look at, if you look at any particular place on a holographic plate, close up, microscopically, so what you would see with the typical image that you're used to, like on a computer or whatever, is you'd see a pixel, right? Yes, you just see a pixel, and there would be one color. That is not what is happening on a holographic plate. Instead, what it is it's a mixture of there is oh wow, it's just so fucking cool. That's why I get to.
I know, but how?
Well, yeah, exactly. You have to go over holography more, but the point is that the entire image is contained at every point in the whole hologram, the whole image, but it's
like
extra dimensionally. Okay, so now whenever you hear about people talking about dimensions, a lot of times you end up thinking of other worlds and shit like that. That's not what it is. An additional dimension is really just another way of connecting information. Okay, that's all. Whenever we deal with it in just regular, like a computer programmer would add another dimension, or to an array. There's not another fucking world or something like that. It's the same world. It's the same data, just connected in a different fashion. And that's what happens with with holograms. Is it's basically you've got it's a fractal storage of images. That's why you can sit there and take. So you've got, let's say it's an image of a star that you're looking at, a big, huge.
Well, would it be fair to say that it is like those images of a face of faces, where you have like all pictures of Barack Obama making up a picture of Barack Obama?
Okay, that's similar to it. Yeah, that's kind of similar to it. Yes, exactly. You could take
each pixel is actually a face, but because the way they're combined together.
But the closer you get, the foggier it is, and the more reliant upon the subtractive information and the additive.
Holograms, or
yes, in holograms. So yes, you've seen one of those pictures made out of faces, and then it itself can make a face.
Right.
That's kind of what a hologram does, except
a picture of pictures.
Right. Except it's even more smeared. It's the.
But wait, smeared. But you said at each pixel you see the exact copy of that image. So, but
no, you don't see the exact copy. You do not see the exact copy of an image.
It just is.
It's present is the point.
But how do you know that it is present if you
because
don't see
you can
it?
take the.
Is that how you program it?
That's what I was getting to. No, but this actually relates very strongly to the way that neural networks also work, which is why this is such a big fucking thing that's going on. Is that holography, neural networks, and the way that now supposedly quantum computing is occurring it's not quantum really, but I'll get to that in a minute. But so if I look at the wall and this huge wall-sized star basically, and I can look and I'll end up seeing the side of this. Let's say it's like a children's toy, like that. It was what it looks like on this holographic screen, and so it's actually got depth. And I can look around the side of it as I move around the wall, and but if I cut that hologram in half, okay, that sheet of paper. Instead of like if I did that with a normal image, I would have two halves of a star, right? I wouldn't have the whole image. But when I cut that in half and I look at the image, I'll have a whole image of a star, two whole images of a star. And then I can cut those in half, and I'll have 4 whole images of a star. I can cut all of those in half, and those in half, and those in half, and make thousands of images of
I understand that
entire
part.
Stars.
I get that hyperbole, but I don't understand
That's
how
not hyperbole.
Well, but I understand how we got here. Like I miss them.
The whole point is
What?
you asked him, how do you know that the
Yeah.
entire image is included
Right.
at every given point? That's how.
How?
Because I can cut it into an arbitrarily small piece, almost arbitrarily. There's a point at which you'll start to zoom in too close.
But what do you mean cut?
I can literally cut it in half.
And you can't cut a hologram?
Yeah, no. There's sheets of you can have a hologram and sheets of paper, not the image. The holographic paper is whether you the plate. Yes. So let's say it's printed out on a sheet of paper a lot of times, and it's actually kind of like a plastic.
Oh, we're talking about flat things on paper.
Yes, that is what projects to your eyes.
But no, we're talking about you're my only hope, Obi-Wan Kenobi.
No, not that. That's not a real hologram. That's nothing real. Nobody has ever produced anything like what you're talking about there.
Yeah, they have. They had dancing Michael Jackson and
that's a
and
different
illusion. And that's true. Some of them were literally smoke and mirrors.
No, it's just, exactly. It's a mirror. It's
some.
Right.
But I think they're trying with a new one
I have a design for a volumetric display which will do that, but I have not patented it. Nobody yet. I came up with it 10 years ago, and still nobody has done it yet. But the point is that no, those types of that's not a hologram. A hologram.
So what the fuck's a hologram?
Is you ever looked on?
Oh, those as a kid, those are fantastic.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas or a greeting card. And you move it, and the characters move.
No, that's a lenticular hologram. That's also different.
I love those.
Okay, the ones that you got.
They always felt so neat. You go, this is on the screen.
That's a lenticular hologram, which is different than a true hologram. Okay, a lenticular
hologram. Fuck! I hate this.
is a lower form. It is a lesser form of a true hologram. A true hologram, if you've ever seen them, a lot of times they're green and you know. Okay, so you
talking about like Halloween things where it's like a lady and then it's a ghost.
No. Usually when it changes back and forth, well, some of them do that too, because you can also do that with a true hologram, but it won't have that surface that's all like got ridges in it. Mm-hmm. That's a different kind. What I'm talking about is a true hologram where it is some of the first examples.
None of us have ever seen it.
No, everybody's seen them. Okay, they used to always be on every. They're on Microsoft seals of
the little birdie.
Yeah, and the birdie on the that's the Visa. That's the Visa. Yes, those are true holograms.
They're hollow.
What?
They're hollow.
What do you mean they're hollow?
HOLO.
Yes,
they have.
Yes, exactly. that new term where people talk about, hollow? Oh, my nails are hollow. No, okay, that comes from hologram. That's why they call it that.
It's rainbows.
Yeah, it's very rainbowy looking. But that's what I'm talking about. That's a true hologram. And so yeah, those other things. One is a sci-fi thing that doesn't even exist. The other is lenticular, which it has some principles of a hologram in it, just a little, but it's a very binary. It's just not even. It shouldn't be considered in any way the same, even though there's some tiny crossover. And I call it tiny, and other people will think it's big, but once you really understand it, it's tiny. But point here is I'm talking about a real hologram, and you can it's on a sheet of paper.
So we're talking about the Visa Dove logo,
right?
Awesome, got it.
You can cut it and cut it and cut it and cut it and have entire stars. So all of that is something that should be fucking amazing to absolutely anyone.
But I've never tried cutting up a Visa card to see if I can still have the dove. But that's what you're saying. That you can peel off that sticker. You can cut it in half, and somehow
you'll have two doves.
You'll have two doves on each picture.
You'll just have a viewport that you have to look at from an angle, but the point is you still have.
You can still see it in there.
Right.
The whole thing, not it cut in half.
The whole thing.
Fucking weird.
Yes. So the point here is that at every point there is the entire object, but with small alterations.
Bonkers. I don't like that.
Yes,
it's too weird. It's crazy.
We're talking about this is nature of the fucking universe.
I don't like that.
That does not make at the core of how the fucking universe works.
That does not make me feel comfortable.
So anyway, going back to quantum computing. So it's not quantum, because everything, when they say quantum, they mean the quantum magic
tiny,
Copenhagen crazy bullshit.
Well, quantum is supposed to be tiny.
Quantum is supposed to be smallest possible unit. So the only thing
Which I see how holograms and quantum might have a common denominator.
And so the only way in which there's different ways you can use the term quantum and it be accurate, you know, and that is when you're talking about a quanta of energy, you are doing things, but you know, truthfully, you can move individual atoms around on a plate, and they've done this numerous times. Like, there's this famous, like, they made what was it? A little video where I think it was IBM made it, and they were like moving atoms around, and you can image individual electrons even. And so when you're talking about like imaging an individual electron or something to
how aren't electrons a probability?
Yeah. Okay. Let's
not. How the fuck do you?
How can you? That's Bunny Trail is not valuable. How can you?
How can you image a probability?
No, we'll get the. I'll explain that to you some other time. So the point here is that there's the quantum realm, and you can do things at the quantum realm, and it's not really the way that people have used the word quantum, and that to infer that the magic things like instantaneous action at a distance, and pure probability.
Is that the same thing?
Existence of pure probability at the core of reality, and observing something, you know, making it real. All of those assumptions that come with a particular interpretation of quantum mechanics. Those are what people have been trying to use the word quantum to mean for a long period of time, and that's a shit way of using the word quantum. And now that's become the dominant way that the word quantum is used, is to represent the magical interpretation bullshit. And so these are actually technically quantum from an engineering space, because
in terms of the size,
it does get down to that size. Yes, in other words, because they're what they're doing
literally quantum.
Right. So it is literally, but what they're doing is analog computing, nothing having to do with the magic bullshit of quantum. Now, here's the thing: the term superposition. So this is talking about this gets down to the heart of the two major interpretations that are kind of at war. You know, it's three, but screw many worlds. Okay, people like many worlds. Fuck many worlds is what I would say right now. Let's just, because it's basically trying to seem more. Copenhagen is complete magic woo-woo bullshit, right? And De Broglie is actually, you can fucking show it at a macro level with John Bush's experiments. You can show exactly what is causing these weird behaviors. And many worlds is just an attempt to seem more rational. That's just adding additional layer of crazy to seem more rational. And people do that all the time. They basically just overload their short-term memory, you know, with more and more bullshit until they lose track of how bullshit it is. So the point here, let's take a step back. I've bunny trailed too much. It happens because there's too many subjects here, but it really does get at the heart of the difference between the quantum physics interpretations, and that's why analog computation is what's occurring here. And if you read through some of the articles on it, you'll
talk about the Google thing.
Yeah, they'll actually briefly mention that it is about analog.
We're gonna read the article.
Well, that it's specifically analog computation that's occurring, and in a way, it's digital analog hybridization at a very tiny level. And that's what's important, is because there are these problems with continuity, like continuum mechanics. There are problems with like the halting problem, infinite regression, and I can only really refer to these things, otherwise we'll get too far afield. But the point is that you have to break out of something that is continuing forward and loop it back around. And this is kind of an issue at the heart of mathematics, at the heart of linear processing. Linear processes have this limitation that was expressed by Kurt Gödel, and so the Gödel incompleteness actually kind of relates to all of these various things, where there are systems where mathematics itself breaks down. And now, when you really, really examine Gödel incompleteness, it's kind of like it looks like a cheat, because basically he's saying is that if you have a good mathematics system, I can make that system say this sentence is false and fuck it up. And so that's kind of seems like a little cheat. You're like, whatever, who cares? When you start to understand Gödel incompleteness, but the the point is that there is the problem of infinite regress and all those things, because linear processes, language itself is linear. A lot of our thought processes are linear. Our conscious thought, in my opinion, is a very linear thought, whereas our emotions and things that we do, you can't really get a handle on exactly where the thought came from. Those things are nonlinear. And what I mean by nonlinear is that there is a tremendous amount of data that is combined simultaneously. And that can be done through waves. Because, and when you think about a wave, the curve of a wave can represent, at each point anywhere along a wave, can represent another value. And so what you can have is nearly infinite values, going all the way down to whatever the smallest size of the substrate is. And so when you are adding waves together, you can fit such a tremendous amount of information together and physically in reality. When those overlap, what ends up happening is a type of computation that is simultaneously happening across a variety of places, like across a very large area. It's simultaneous, and it is multi-layered. That's the point, is that you can have it multi-layered because of the how holography works. So taking these principles together, what they were doing with the Google.
We can just read about what they're doing.
Oh, well,
because we have the paper from Nature.
Let's go ahead and read it. It's not going to be all that comprehensible at first, but
yeah,
go ahead.
And you did mention analog thing. I did find them saying, in total, we orchestrate 277 digital to analog converters for complete control of the quantum processor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, exactly. It's analog. It's analog computation. That's how they're doing it. It's what I said. Like I said, 10 fucking years ago, and finally they're catching up.
Ooh, that looks sexy. That's a sexy processor.
Yep.
So it's an article in Nature, because they published their findings in October 23rd. Should we read just the abstract and then? Oh, the first thing in the early 1980s, Richard Feynman. Oh, good old Feynman. All right. The promise of quantum computers is that certain computational tasks might be executed exponentially faster on a quantum processor than on a classical processor. A fundamental challenge is to build a high-fidelity processor capable of running quantum algorithms in an exponentially large computational space. Here we report the use of a processor with programmable superconducting qubits to create quantum states on 53 qubits, corresponding to a computational state space of dimension 2 to the 53rd power, about 10 to 16th power.
Yeah, this is not going to be all that valuable. There's another article I can give you that's more valuable.
An article that is digesting it versus the actual.
I actually never finished a thought that I do need to finish, which is superposition. So the term superposition actually lies at the heart of the difference between the two interpretations of quantum mechanics, and is relevant to this discussion, because superposition is a term when you take two waves and superimpose them on each other. In other words, when two waves enter the same space and interfere, they are superposed. So they are in superposition.
Well, are they interfering, or are they superposed, or is it all of the above?
They are interfering, and they are superposed. When waves interfere, they are superposed, and so there is superposition. But whenever you're talking about quantum mechanics and the Copenhagen interpretation, they take that superposition to represent multiple possible, versions of reality, or possible versions of where the particle is. Now, I've got an entire paper on how particles are emergent and actually occur because of these interactions of waves that I'll be coming out with soon. But the point here is, and that if you look at John Bush's work at MIT and how he's got the hydrodynamic analogs, you can understand how these processes work in an intuitive fashion. Everything makes sense instead of all the quantum magic woo-woo that is part of science. It's an accepted part of science, a bunch of quantum magic woo-woo. And that's because of the Copenhagen interpretation. So when they talk about superposition in the context of the Copenhagen interpretation, they act like that's the only interpretation and it's the right one, and they don't even address that they're talking in the context of Copenhagen interpretation being right. They talk about superposition, they are talking about all the possibilities of where the particle could be. But that's instead what you should be looking at, is that it is waves on top of other waves, making a complex combination of waves, that's how a hologram works, and that's why depending on where I'm looking at a hologram from in the room, I'm going to be getting a different image, because at each point in the room, the waves are coming from a different angle. So the way that they add together, the way they superpose upon my eye, is going to give me a different image, because there's going to be different things added and subtracted to the form of the waves, and so that's why you get a different image. So whenever we're talking about superposition in quantum computing, what we're talking about is actual waves, period. There's no magicness, but there is data on top of data, and therefore by putting data on top of data in this way, it is combined in a method that is computation, and so they are capable. And so some of the people are kind of acting like the Google quantum supremacy announcement is kind of underwhelming, and to a certain extent it is a bit, because they from one perspective it's kind of underwhelming, from another perspective it's not. And so it really just depends on your perspective, the way that you're looking at it, and what you mean by underwhelming, because they have to, because it is a small iterative step. It is small, but it
is a step.
But it's a step in the right direction. It's the first real step in the right fucking direction that we've ever made. Although all the other steps are all about trying to
use the woo-woo shit.
Use the woo-woo shit, exactly. But here they're using
all that entanglement,
Joseph's injunctions, which
I was gonna read about that in Nature.
You know, the guy I talk to all the time, right?
Yeah, because here when we're doing the analog thing, right here, the thing right above it actually says that the processor is fabricated using aluminum for materialization and Joseph's injunctions, and indium for bump bonds between two silicon wafers.
Yeah, that's what Josephson. That's what Brian got his Nobel for.
Oh, nice.
The Josephson.
Oh, I didn't know he was a Nobel.
Yeah, you didn't know that. That's whenever
I know you talk to Nobels. I just didn't know.
No, just
and
one.
Then
just one. Yeah.
Well, there's laureates and there's winners, and then there's
laureate is the same thing. It's
and then
is a prize.
And then there's like the high IQ. There's like so many fucking.
Yeah, the National Science Foundation guy,
Right, the National Science Foundation guy, the highest IQ in the world guy, this Nobel guy, that Nobel guy, like just whatever, you know. No, people you run with.
Whatever. One Nobel laureate, only one.
Only one.
Get
off that number.
Well, okay, I only talk to. I don't.
See, there it is. We do know more than one. By extension.
Yeah, only by extension. So anyway, so what's going on is that what they've done is make it controllable, and so so you can't just have, just go send some waves out and then compute things, but then as they continue to move forward, the angles of incidence change, and so the data changes, as it's moving through space.
Yeah.
And so therefore you don't really get so how do you capture the computation? So you have to be able to, the computation is working, but you have to be able to capture it. And that's basically what all these little nodes are doing, is they're capturing the computation and moving it forward. These Joseph's injunctions.
What do you mean capturing?
In other words, reducing it down to something useful.
What the hell is a computation then?
Okay, think about this. No, let's go back to down to this. You want to, until you actually look at
and this is going to sound a whole lot like the woo-woo Copenhagen shit, but then you'll understand, but in a much more understandable way.
All right.
Until you look at a hologram, all it is just waves in the air. Okay, until you look at it from a given particular angle,
right?
It's just waves in the air, and so there's nothing.
So you need to
capturing that particular
mark that particular interaction and then go from there.
Right, you need to be able to capture the data to use it somehow. So that actually reduces the total data, though. You understand? In other words,
I don't understand anything about this.
Okay, so a hologram is when you the way a hologram works. So remember, I was talking about there's light projecting from the top left corner and from the bottom left corner, and those are combining in your eye. Well, now if I move 1 foot to my left, there's still it going to where my eye was, and now there's also still, and there is the top left and bottom right corner going to my eye in that new 1 foot to the left location, because it's always going to all the locations in the entire room, all those various angles and all those combinations of top left corner and bottom right corner can be found anywhere in the room at any given time. So all of them are there. That is a fuck ton of data, right? Because and each one of them is different. So it's only upon viewing it do I get an image, and only upon getting that image is the data really useful. So to be able to continue forward in the computing process and react to it and continue to compute, because a computer doesn't do this and this done. You know, it's got to be this and this. Now next decision, this and this. Now next decision, this and this. Now next decision. So you have to be able to break up the continuous data into discrete components, and that's why it's hybridization of digital and analog. Because when it's analog, when it's just the fuck ton of data, it's not really particularly useful.
Right.
I mean, just waves out there in the ocean are computing something. But you can't really use it. I mean, they're all adding together. They could represent some system, but how are you going to use that data? And that is what is accomplished by this quantum supremacy announcement. Is that the Joseph's injunctions are what's reducing it down, taking that combined data and basically seeing it, and then adding it back into the system, or allowing it to continue forward through the system and continue to compute. So basically being able to react to it and alter the data is what's necessary for it to really be a processor. In other words, you don't have a processor that is useful in any way until you're able to combine the data. In other words, it's the combination of the waves. Once I combine the waves on my eye, I've basically destroyed that image. In other words, like when I'm looking at the hologram, and it's in the bottom left and the top right corner come to my eye, they're combined, and then it's absorbed by my the cells in my retina. I've destroyed that data now by in its current form, and allowed it to take away and when it was all of those images, because what I'm really experiencing is all of the copies of the star simultaneously. Billions of copies of that star are impinging on my eye, and I reduce them down to one. That's what's really happening with a hologram. Now, doesn't that sound a whole lot like Copenhagen superposition stuff? Well, you have to know.
Yeah.
Totally. It sounds a lot like it, except now it makes rational fucking sense.
Right.
Now it makes deterministic, rational.
Now we're taking pictures of fog banks.
Yeah, right.
Instead of having foggy lenses.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly.
Well, essentially, if what they're seeing is, that's the thing, but how do you interpret it, right?
Right,
so, yeah.
right. And so
the thing may have some similarities because they are looking at a thing.
And she just made a reference to Schrodinger's cat, where he said there's a difference between a shaky.
Is it Schrodinger's cat or just Schrodinger?
It's Schrodinger himself talking about the Schrodinger cat.
About the cat.
It's like that basically telling.
Yeah, I just quoted Schrodinger.
It's an idiotic thing to think that what we're looking at is a blurred version of reality. There's a difference between a shaky or out of focus lens and snapshots of fog banks, and that's so
fucking well said, man.
Yes. So what we're looking at is that is not the what's on the holographic plate is not factually in any way a fuzzy existence.
Right.
It's just fuzzy data. It's
Right.
all fucking mixed together in a way that you can only unmix that data by having light shine on it and come back out to you, and you've got all these billions of images that are basically combining together, billions of copies of these images all combining together at your eye, because that's what you're looking at. When you're looking at a hologram, you're looking at billions of images and getting one image. That's what's happening, and people don't really get that is how holography works, and that's the way that neural networks work also. And most people really, actually, I'd say no one really understands this, but that is what's occurring. That's why you can actually they've created well, you just Google holographic neural networks, whatever. Anyway, continuing forward, the point here is that it is now a controllable through the Joseph's injunctions. What they have done is created a controllable points at which you can sample the data and alter it and continue that analog process. And so that's what's going on with these different points in it, is that they're going back and forth between digital and analog. And so, and that is the power of, that's why it's capable of doing. And now one of the things that they'll talk about is like, well, nature's doing these, they a lot of times they call them like trans-Turing computation. And basically what they mean is that there is, it's the problem is linear thought, we have a fundamental issue with the way that language works, because language is so much a part of how we think, the way that math itself works. Math itself is a linear process.
Yeah.
This happens and this happens and this happens. There's an order of events.
There's literally an order of operations that is baked into the thing. Like, it's a very particular linear process.
Right. And so the point is that there are processes that are not linear in that fashion. And the word linear here, because you can say nonlinear and it doesn't mean what I mean. What I'm saying is that there are concurrent processes, massive concurrency happening actually simultaneously that happen all throughout nature.
Process versus multiple.
And they recognize that in some of these articles. They recognize that there is a this concurrency occurring in nature, and and whenever you read some articles by the people who are deeply in the quantum computing field, they're like, yeah, that's great and all that theoretically nature can do that, but we can't do that with a controllable processor.
Right.
And now basically that's what it did. It mimicked something that nature just does and was able to get at the data and change
when
it.
you say nature, you mean, what do you
just
mean?
waves flying.
Physics.
Yes.
The physical
waves
reality.
flying all over the place and smashing into each other and doing all the crazy shit that they do. And that, because that is a type of processing. That is something that occurs. And then being able to mimic that. And then by doing that, what you do is you change the way that calculation itself is done. It's no longer like the way that we do math. It is a completely different mode of mathematics.
But what you mean by that is just instead of having one equation running, you have like 80 equations running, but they're still doing the linear process.
But instead of 80 equations running,
or they check in with each other
at the same time, they all impact each other as they are computing.
They check in with each other at points.
Right. They're all inextricably linked from one another. They cannot be separated from one another, even though they're all these various things are happening. The kitty. God. Stop it, kitty. We're having to deal with a cat messing with our equipment. Of course. So yes, it is. The way that we've seen concurrency in the past is basically like you have all of these different equations running at the same time, and you can have and you can get more done by having more happening in various places. But that's different when each of them is dependent upon the answers of the others. You have to wait for one to conclude before, or at least come to that point. But it's literally simultaneous at the smallest possible level, at the smallest division of even the number. the division of the number, itself into its components. It's that level of concurrent, and that is not something. That level of concurrency, that level of simultaneous action, is not something that's even easily. Our brains have a hard time even conceiving that.
Oh, you tell me. I know.
It's because of language, and it's because of mathematics. Mathematics does not do that. It simply does not work that way, which is why Gödel incompleteness exists, is because mathematics is this linear sort of process. It can always be broken in this way, but our brains are analog processors that do convert to digital. That's what our brains do, is analog to digital. Analog digital hybridization.
I don't know what that means.
That means having simultaneous information.
But what's the difference between that and the other? Like, what is
digital? It's like the difference between a regular image with all the pixels on it.
No.
And
What
hologram.
physically, procedurally, what is the difference?
I don't understand what you're asking.
The regular computing, how we had it done, versus.
Okay, well, in regular computing, you have ones and zeros. And a one represents, it's in binary, and so you have like 8 ones, and they end up representing a bit. And so, what do you or a byte? I mean, what's going on over there, babe? Okay. Yeah, that got me distracted. So the point is that each of them only represents a certain amount of data, and then you procedurally there's little tricks you can do with the way that you combine ones and zeros, and that's how computation occurs. But but each point means one thing. You can't have multiple layers of data. In other words, in one place it means one thing, and there's only one meaning. Where it is in this. That's one of the powers of the way that we use language, is that because of the context dependency of language, we often can have multiple simultaneous interpretations, and that's why you have things like puns, because it can mean 2 things at the same time, and literally mean both things. It is the ambiguity of language that itself, this wiggle room that allows multiple meanings, real meanings, specific meanings, to be overlapped. So it is this overlapping process in nature and in our brains, and now in quantum computers, because they're not quantum, they're just analog computation. It is this overlapping of information, this multiple meanings in the exact same place. Real meanings, not some fuzzy, vague, maybe look at it and it makes it real type of things, but real multiple meanings. Just like and just like that hologram has real multiple versions of that star all across that fucking surface. But it requires, to make the best version of that star, it requires the whole surface. And so, because one of the things I didn't point out is, as you get smaller and smaller and smaller, as I cut that hologram
you did say it
into
gets
pieces,
fuzzy.
yes, it gets fuzzier because it's missing the information from the larger picture. The larger picture actually, yeah, exactly. All the other versions of the star actually refine it, and so there is both addition and subtraction from that image that smaller image that could have occurred to make it more refined. And so the whole nature of multi-layered data is that the whole information from the whole refines the smaller parts. And so there's this interaction of the largest scale with the smallest scale that is crucial to the way that reality works, but it's crucial to the way that holograms work, and it's crucial to the way that this multi-layered data processing methodology works. And so that's why this is actually something that will work out. This is the first time that they've created anything like a quantum computer that will fucking work. But I've been talking with people in Italy, and like there's actually an Italian, I think he may be a monk, who's actually part of a science program. I don't know if it's like by the Vatican or what, but they've got a different version of of quantum computing using only optics. And I think it's going to be a superior methodology because they've eliminated the biggest problem. Well, now, okay, so Google's chip, what it does is it eliminates a lot of the difficulties of if you have other electromagnetic interference coming in, you fuck up the finite, tiny little, because what we're talking about is at the quantum level. So
Yeah.
the
Tiny.
photon level or the electron level, we're talking about very, very small
Yeah.
things. And so the tiniest bit of interference gets in there and it's completely fucked your calculation. And but so how do you
really sensitive system?
Super goddamn crazy fucking sensitive system. And that's why it's so hard to get it to work at all. Even with what they've done, they've found a way to kind of get around some of that a little bit with their methodology. But an optics only methodology, which is something I've been talking to people about for a while, and they've developed in Italy, may actually be a superior methodology. I'm not going to get into it, but it may be.
The excitement on your face is enough for me.
Yes, and so they're part of the group that I'm in. So anyway, it's neat that they finally have made progress because they've finally broken through the bullshit. They're no longer working on multiple universe,
right.
stupid, woo woo. They're instead working on real deterministic mechanics that make sense, and you can actually trace down the way that it works. Now they don't. Unfortunately, a lot of times people, they find something before they understand it, and it's only by finding that they finally see all the pieces and start to understand it, because that's what happened with the Coudet experiments that John Bush has been, has he finally published his paper yet? I don't know. He was supposed to publish it in January of this year, and then he said middle of this year, and that's like I really hope he's done his review on the Walker's experiments.
Yeah, you said this a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I know. It's driving me crazy. It's driving me crazy. John Bush, if you hear me,
if you're listening,
please. But anyway,
publish that review.
Publish that review. It'll finally revolutionize physics, and we can finally give up our crazy, quantum woo.
So, have you checked in with him? Is he okay? Is he
alive?
Is
he okay? I don't know. Has his family been threatened? He might have been.
Right. Is he okay?
Exactly. I'm wondering. Seriously. I am kind of wondering that maybe there's a reason he hasn't published it, because it will.
Because it's almost a year now that he should have. It's coming up on 9 months.
And so it's like, and it will cause a revolution in physics. It's going to, and I think people are afraid of that. People are very afraid of a revolution in physics.
Well, they've been asking for it, but they're also afraid of it at the same time, which is
So.
It's like I read in Dune: forever ready, forever unprepared.
Yep.
Or forever prepared, forever unready.
Yeah. So that's what this is about. Now, there's another article I think I can find.
We should have been talking about quantum Darwinism.
Okay, we talked about quantum.
But there's first, last, doesn't matter. It's just the whole computing thing came up, and you said that it actually wasn't bullshit, so we had to, of course.
Yes. For the first time, quantum computing is not bullshit anymore because it's not quantum. It just happens to be at the quantum level.
Right.
But it's not really quantum like the magic bullshit that they always associate with the
theory.
word quantum.
Well,
it's not Copenhagen.
See, unfortunately, there's quantum theory and quantum mechanics. And quantum mechanics actually tries to look at things at the small scale. How might it possibly work? And then we have quantum theory, which is a whole lot of bullshit.
Of it.
Right. Yes.
Because yes,
theory is the interpretation.
Real things that
the mechanics is what you theoretically should be seeing and trying to.
Here's the thing: you can design a street based on the number of people you have and the number of cars. The passengers you get, and only look at a probabilistic version. Okay, this is. I'm looking at the confusion on your face. The point here is that probabilistic models you can engineer based on probability and not actually see any individual unit, and those individual units can actually be real, even though you don't see any given one of them because you're using a probability based. You've seen all how the cars flow through, and you're just using a model of the probability
densities.
Bad,
is this good? What are we talking? What?
And the point here is that previous quantum physics has worked based on probability
And
assumptions.
it somehow worked. It somewhat worked because
Yes, it worked within limits. It
right,
is truth within limits.
if you know a given city and you know the amount of
Right,
people
it
in it,
is-
you know the amount of cars, you could theoretically design a roadway that would accommodate all that.
But you can't design the way that a automated car works based on that your probability based models of how to design those streets. So it'll work for designing the way you lay out streets and crosswalks and all of that kind of shit because it is probability. But you can't make an automated car because it has to react to individual instances of pedestrians, individual instances of when a light turns on and off.
Right.
And so that's the point, is that there are layers of granularity, and there are levels at which something can be useful, and you have to be able to understand. And I have such a hard time dealing with people not understanding that there's truth within limits. And that's the thing with Copenhagen, is there is truth within limits, and you can have all these crazy ideas and it still work out.
But it's not as useful as getting to a deeper truth.
Right, and then that's the other side of it. People are, well, if it's mathematically equivalent, then who cares? No, you're an imbecile. First off, you say that.
Well, it's not mathematically equivalent.
Well,
to what end?
To a certain level it is, and so people don't understand. There's a difference between understanding and knowledge. A shitty old type of AI had lots of knowledge, and there's no amount of knowledge that if it's not arranged properly.
Right.
That'll ever lead to actual understanding. And the difference, understanding what exactly understanding is, has been the biggest thing in the way of the progress of science, period.
Yeah.
Not just, especially physics, because in physics, they gave up the whole idea of understanding.
Yeah, they gave over to postmodernism.
Tried to make fun. Yeah, exactly. It's postmodernism, where and they basically resorted to a new faith.
Yeah,
because they didn't believe understanding is crucial.
That's the weird thing about relativity, is that's one of the only really places in science the hard science, that we have such a super highway of taking in postmodernism.
Yeah, well, that's exactly where it started. And it started at
medicine doesn't do that,
and then it was advanced supremely by the Copenhagen interpretation. That's where science broke. We didn't believe in a goddamn tiny little bit of fucking magic before special relativities, and special relativity is an interpretation. There is
because it's all based on the Michelson-Morley experiment. A lot of people don't realize that the history of how special relativity came about is a very single case through which they developed a rationalization of a single experiment.
Yeah, well, it's not just. There's more to it than that. Because
there's a Lorentz and all of the
because
building
it's important
of
to understand that it was Lorentz ethers. It was actually Lorentz Poincaré ether is completely equivalent to special relativity. It is an alternative interpretation.
Right.
And by 1920, Einstein said that
space a better one. Yeah.
Space without ether is unthinkable. Now, he didn't completely he still didn't agree with Lorentz and Poincaré, which was really it's really Poincaré's use of Lorentz's kinematics. But the point is that it's an alternative interpretation that has never ever been differentiated by experiment. We believe in only one interpretation because of fashion, because of popularity, because of social shit, not because of actual goddamn science. So anyway, yes, that's it. Well, I've been fighting this shit for 15 years.
I know, but we're now not fighting. We're not fighting these people. These people are on our side. We don't need to.
I've been fighting for so long.
I know, you don't know when to not fight.
All right. You're right.
But isn't it also Poincaré's extended equation that got collapsed into E = mc squared, or was that somebody else's?
Well, okay. There was Poincaré could be said to have been the first, except he just didn't reduce it to the
right. Okay, so it was Poincaré. Yeah.
The first pointed out E = mc squared. Yeah, but it was
just in a longer
form
equation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just you were saying how it was just really funny that you were like, oh yeah, Einstein was like, yeah, fuck this Poincaré guy and all of his stuff, except I'm gonna totally use his equation and be my only claim to fame.
And not cite any sources.
And not cite any. That's literally that is his fatal flaw. The lack of citing sources.
Yeah, but I think it was informality, and I think it was.
True. I suppose so.
I think it was not
malicious.
Not malicious. He was being informal. and because
And
it was
he-
part of such a small group of
And
people,
he was
and-
used as a poster child, and then
Right.
that was not his doing. That
right,
you know.
and even the constancy of light, even the initial on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, the
original paper.
initial special relativity paper,
Yeah.
he could have been interpreted as saying it's simply not necessary to consider the ether,
'Cause
not necessarily
that it
saying
doesn't
that there
exist.
absolutely is not one. That
Right.
then there's a difference between saying it is not necessary to consider
Mhm.
and there absolutely is not one.
For sure.
And it was really 1907 Minkowski that took that and hardened those statements in that paper to mean absolutely that there was not one.
So it's not even Einstein, it's his fucking little understudy.
Well, no, actually,
Or the other way around.
it kind of is both. Because Minkowski was his mentor, and then Minkowski basically, his claim to fame became his extension of special relativity, and then he dropped dead, and everybody worshipped Minkowski, and that's why we have space time instead of ether. So, anyways, it's because he dropped dead in a tiny little community, and they literally had public fights about not properly honoring this dead guy. So yeah, no, it was in the biggest.
Because he was Einstein's sensei.
Yes, exactly. How dare you not honor Minkowski, you bastard? No, it's really, that's the sociological aspects of what occurred in that period of time, and you can just see it happen. Exactly.
What year was that?
That was that he died. It was 19. I think it was shit. It was between 1907 and 1909. I don't remember what point.
So early.
But it was not many years after he dropped his major work on special relativity. But that's what hardened it into that there is no ether, and that's why we stuck with the absolutely that there is no ether.
Mhm.
Instead, it was basically to honor Minkowski because he
Right.
died, and he was friends with Hilbert. He was best friends with Hilbert, by the way.
No idea what that is.
He's a famed mathematician of the time, very well known, and there was only they were all fucking buddies. They were all buddies, and Hilbert was fucking devastated by Minkowski's sudden death. And it was just before he was setting up a meeting between Poincaré and Minkowski to work out some stuff.
Oh no!
And it ended up.
Why didn't he just hold on?
Yeah, I know, he just died suddenly. And it was just it just fucked everything up. Minkowski's death fucked physics. It did. I mean,
what happened to him?
I think he had like gallstones or something, like a appendicitis,
Some
or
sort of sudden.
I think it may have been like an appendicitis. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was. I get the feeling it was from my memory, which is fuzzy on that particular topic, that it was something like that, and he just dropped.
Which is untimely death, essentially.
Exactly, his untimely death fucked everything up, and because of his social position.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And now we're here 100 years later. Literally 100 years later.
More than 100 years later, yeah.
We said 1909. Oh,
yeah.
110 years later.
Right.
We're trying to right this ship.
Right, yeah. And actually the first person to make a tiny little mistake was actually
we're talking
Fresnel,
about nature of the universe. Tiny little mistakes are okay.
Yes.
It's blindly going into a direction without stopping.
Well, what led people to
stubbornly, not blindly,
to misunderstand ether theory properly was actually Fresnel using one
Fresnel's coefficient.
No, before where Fresnel's coefficient.
That's all I know
came from.
It's like Planck's constant, Fresnel's coefficient.
Yes.
That's how I know these people's names.
Was he used density instead of rigidity.
Love that.
Yeah, and so that was the problem. That's where he fucked up ether theory. But anyway, all that aside, and that's in my paper.
But density's good. Like talking about like buoyancy density, right? Or
yeah, but it's just it's in one. There's one equation where everything started, and I've pointed out this is the equation. This is where the first seeds of the deviation in physics occurred. And then it solidified in Minkowski, and then it exploded at Bohr in Copenhagen interpretation. But so I've traced down all of the roots of where everything went wrong. So anyway, going back to the quantum Darwinism. Let's read that shit.
Hell yeah! Let us do this thing. It's from Quantum Magazine. And was fairly recently published in the past 2 months. 3 experiments have vetted quantum Darwinism, a theory that explains how quantum possibilities can give rise to objective classical reality. Yay! Objective reality.
Yeah. Well, they're talking about this.
Well, classical interpretation, right?
No, they're talking
Possible?
about that it goes from the quantum world of spooky weirdness to the classical world that we can understand, where objects actually exist, and so that's still kind of canon for Copenhagen interpretation, all that as well. So let's go ahead and continue forward.
Satisfying. All right. Here we go. Let's make it a little smaller. There we go. All right. Let's check it out. What's it saying? Okay, this was published all the way in July. My bad, it's pretty old. It's not surprising that quantum physics has a reputation for being weird and counterintuitive. The world we live in sure doesn't feel quantum mechanical. Until the 20th century, everyone assumed that the classical laws of physics devised by Isaac Newton and others, according to which objects have well-defined positions and properties at all times, work at every scale. But Max Planck, Einstein, Niels Bohr, and other assholes, and their contemporaries discovered that down among atoms and subatomic particles, this concreteness dissolves into a soup of possibilities. Don't ever use the word soup in relation to physics, please. An atom typically can't be assigned a definite position, for example. We can merely calculate the probability of finding it in various places, so our current theory says. The vexing question then becomes...
I like how you're adding little asides. You gotta do it in a different voice so people know when you're adding an aside.
Hopefully they are reading as well. Yeah.
They can read along. Okay, good.
But yeah, I should. An atom typically can't be assigned a definite position, for example. We can merely calculate the probability in finding it in various places. The vexing question then becomes, how do quantum probabilities coalesce into the sharp focus of the classical world? Physicists sometimes talk about this changeover as the quantum classical transition, and that's what you were expecting this to be. Okay.
Right.
Damn, I got excited. One of the most remarkable ideas in this theoretical framework is that the definite properties of objects that we associate with classical physics, position and speed, say, are selected from a menu of quantum possibilities in a process loosely analogous to natural selection and evolution. I see. The properties that survive are in some sense the fittest. As in natural selection, the survivors are those that make the most copies of themselves. This means that many independent observers can make measurements of a quantum system and agree on the outcome, a hallmark of classical behavior. This idea, called quantum Darwinism, QD, explains a lot about why we experience the world the way we do, rather than the peculiar way it manifests at the scale of atoms and fundamental particles, according to our theory. Although aspects, it's important to add that because it is just a theory. It's not
right. And it's one
reality.
of many alternatives, and they're acting like it's the only alternative.
Exactly.
Like I said, they always do.
It grinds my gears.
Right.
Although aspects of the puzzle remain unsolved, QD helps heal the apparent rift between quantum and classical physics. Only recently, the quantum Darwinism has been put to the experimental test. So let's look at these tests.
So what are they saying is adding it seems like we've skipped forward. What's being put to the test?
The idea of quantum Darwinism.
And how did they sum up that idea?
That it is essentially, the way they summed it up is that, where is it? There we go. One of the most remarkable, blah, 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 blah. One of the most remarkable ideas in this theoretical framework is that the definite properties of objects that we associate with classical physics, like position and speed, are selected from a menu of quantum possibilities akin to natural selection, and therefore are the fittest because they're the ones that made it.
Okay.
Are selected from a menu of quantum possibilities in a process loosely analogous to natural selection and evolution. The properties that survive are in some sense the quote-unquote fittest. As in, this next sentence makes no sense to me. As in natural selection, the survivors are those that make the most copies of themselves. Oh, okay. Okay, I think I understand what they're saying. As in natural selection, the survivors are those that make the most copies of themselves. This means that many independent observers can make measurements of a quantum system and agree on the outcome, which is a hallmark of classical behavior. I didn't get that at first, but I think what they're trying to say is that, well, if it is the most fittest quality, then it's going to end up in very many of the observable things. And then because a lot of people are observing the same qualities, that means that it's classically.
Let me read that last
Yeah,
fucking part of that
last,
sentence
I know,
slowly.
I know.
Wait, I have to see it
I swear.
because that's
It's a weird one.
This means many independent observers can make measurements of a quantum system and agree on the outcome. So they're just saying
As
that.
a natural
So here, what they're saying, I get to get
Right,
at, which
yeah.
is that additional copies lead to the ability for independent observers to come to the same conclusion.
Right, and also
Because
as
there's
an
a creation of additional copies is the important part here.
and as in evolution, those copies, the fittest traits will be observed in the greater number of offspring. Is that relevant? Because it feels like that's what they're trying to say. They're like,
Sure.
they're
Who knows? We're going to have to continue forward from here. All we got is copies. Copies is the
Well, what they're
is
trying
the
to do-
mechanism that they're trying to.
what they're
reveal.
trying to do is to have what is that thing called? Repeatability. Right? Is that what it's called? Whenever multiple
Replication. Yeah.
Yes, they're trying to actually achieve replication, which is a hallmark of classical behavior. And
No,
Yeah, I
that's not that. That's you're conflating two different
many
topics.
independent observers make measurements of a quantum system and agree on the outcome.
Yes.
Replicability of.
No, that's no. What they're talking about is within one experiment, not.
Also, they're trying to get rid of the observer effect. In a way.
Sort of. Yeah, it sounds like. But okay, let's continue forward.
Okay. Do you want to read this or?
Yeah, actually.
Sure, I'll send it to you.
Well, no, I can just sit down here and we can just switch for a second.
Sure.
Yeah. All right. This idea called quantum Darwinism explains a lot about why we experience the world the way that we do, rather than in the. Oh,
Yes.
Yeah, you made it where I can't
Because we are also
see it.
showing it to people, so I just want to see where it's at so that you know to scroll.
Okay.
Showing you what the people are seeing.
Oh, I
because
didn't.
you are
I
in charge
didn't
of
see
that.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, we'll show you again.
Okay. I didn't know what you were showing.
This is what the people are seeing.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so we are right here. And so
Right.
it's about a paragraph at a time. I can make it smaller if you want. But
It's fine.
okay.
All right.
So just that way you can scroll through and
Okay.
people will
So
read
now I
along
know
with you.
it's like this little area right
Yeah.
here. Okay. All right. Why we experience the world the way that we do, rather than the peculiar way it manifests the scale of atoms and fundamental particles. Although aspects of the puzzle remain unsolved, QD helps heal the apparent rift between quantum and classical physics.
And there's 3 experiments that we will look at theoretically that prove that.
Okay.
It's in this article.
Yes. Only recently, however, has quantum Darwinism been put to the test. 3 research groups working independently in Italy, China, and Germany have looked for the telltale signature of the natural selection process by which information about quantum systems, about a quantum system, gets repeatedly imprinted on various controlled environments. These tests are rudimentary, and experts say there's still much more to be done before we can feel sure that QD provides the right picture of how our concrete reality condenses from the multiple options that quantum mechanics offers. Yet so far, the theory checks out. Unfortunately, they still have not adequately explained the theory.
What the theory is.
What the fuck the theory is, exactly. But hopefully they're getting to that now in this next section. Survival of the fittest. At the heart of quantum Darwinism is
There
the
it is.
slippery notion of measurement. The
Slippery.
process of making an observation. In classical physics, what you see is simply how things are. You observe a tennis ball traveling 200 kilometers per hour because that's its speed. What more is there to say? Well, I'll tell you what. Let me break right here and tell you what there is more to say. And that is, if you take a picture of a tennis ball going 200 miles per hour with one setting on your camera, which is a very high, not frame rate. What's the word for it? What are you doing?
Don't worry about it. Ignore me.
Okay. With a shutter speed.
I'm doing the
That
thing that I
is-
need to do sitting in that seat.
Okay.
Control the stream.
With a lower.
F-stop?
Yeah, no, that's different. With a lower shutter speed. So in other words, how long the shutter stays open.
So
If
how
you
much
have
light it allows in, right?
how much light it allows in over how much
'Cause I don't
how
really-
much time it's open is what shutter speed.
Light
is.
in particular is my weakness. I do not understand how
What
that
will
works.
happen is you'll have a blur of that tennis ball across a long distance, and what that blur will tell you, if you know the shutter speed,
is the speed of that ball. And the longer that blur is, the more precise your measurement of the speed of that ball
So the longer it stays
will
open?
be. Exactly. Because they'll have a much longer thing that you can measure. And,
More accuracy.
and so your accuracy about the speed of that ball will increase. However, your measurement of where that ball is when the shutter was open is more inaccurate the longer it's open. And the faster it opens and then closes, the more precisely you'll know exactly where the ball was when the shutter opened and during the time that the shutter was open, during the observation. Yet you will not be able to determine the speed.
Right.
These are conjugate variables that are
What's the basics
exactly
of physics?
equivalent to what we see in quantum physics. So anyway, so let's move forward from there and continue reading. Which that switch that you did, I think we could have just left it without that switch. That would have been fine.
Anytime you're talking and not reading, you have to do your face on this game. And when you're
okay.
reading, you have to do that.
Okay. So you have to go back.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, I do.
All right. I don't think so. Okay, there we go. I think all the pausing is more undoes the necessary.
But you're not supposed to let the audience. You're breaking the fourth wall.
I'm breaking the 4th
You're
wall.
telling
no,
the audience
you're right.
about all the things that I'm doing behind the scenes. You're supposed to be. You're always always giving me away whenever I'm trying to do something behind the scenes.
It's terrible.
You're just too honest.
All right. What more is there to say? That was what's more to say. Okay. In quantum physics, that's no longer true. It's not at all obvious what the formal mathematical procedures quantum mechanics say about how things are in a quantum object. They're just a prescription telling us what we might see if we take a measurement. Take, for example, the way a quantum particle can have a range of possible states known as superposition. This doesn't really mean it is in several states at once. Rather, it means that if we make a measurement, we will see one of those outcomes. And of course, what they just said there is entirely opinion. It's not even necessary.
Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
That's not
the first
even.
time I'm hearing that.
That's this writer's opinion.
Yeah.
Because according to a lot of people in quantum physics, that it is in those multiple states simultaneously. Before the measurement, the various
he's making it more sane than it is.
Yeah, that happens all the time. People constantly add their own sanity to things that are fucked up, and try to make it make more sense to them. When it just doesn't make any sense, and the problem is you should not be believing it instead of trying to make it make more sense. Before the measurement, the various superposed states interfere with one another in a wave-like manner, producing outcomes with higher or lower probability. This is basically they're believing that it's in a particle. Well, this writer believes that it's in a particle like state before being measured, and that is entirely his opinion, and
right,
that is not consensus.
It's supposed to be a wave that collapses into a particle. So before it's measured, it's a wave, and then only when it's measured, it becomes a particle, right?
Pretty much.
That was my understanding of it.
Right, that it actually does exist as all those probabilities is the consensus Copenhagen interpretation.
This is good. This is actually really, really good because they are self-censoring themselves to finally be more logical.
No, what'll happen? No, this has been going on in relativity forever. There's 10,000 different interpretations of special relativity because people are trying to make it fit reality, and none of them
the base
are aware that the words that they're saying don't mean the same thing to the person that they're talking to, and so you end up having all these different interpretations where people don't know that there's lots of different interpretations, and they all believe there's just one, and it's not. They're all understanding it in a different way. So anyway, that's what's going on here. But why can't we see a quantum superposition? Why can't all possibilities for the state of a particle survive right up to the human scale? The answer, often given, is that superpositions are fragile, easily disrupted when a delicate quantum system is buffeted by its noisy environment. And that's called the decoherence. And then he continues on. Okay. But that's not quite right. When any two quantum objects interact, they get entangled with each other, entering a shared quantum state in which the possibilities for their properties are interdependent. So say an atom is put into a superposition of two possible states for the quantum property called spin up and down. Now the atom is released into the air, where it collides with an air molecule and becomes entangled with it. The two are now in a joint superposition.
The atom is spin up, then the air molecule might be pushed one way, while if the atom is spin down, the air molecule goes another way. And these two possibilities coexist. As the particles experience yet more collisions with other air molecules, the entanglement spreads, and this superposition, initially specific to the atom, becomes ever more diffuse. The atom's superposed states no longer interfere coherently with one another because they are now entangled with other states in the surrounding environment, including perhaps some large measuring instrument. To that measuring device, it looks as though the atom superposition has vanished and been replaced by a menu of possible classical-like outcomes that no longer interfere with one another. The process by which quantumness disappears into the environment is called decoherence. It is a crucial part of the quantum classical transition, explaining why quantum behavior. Oops, I need to move this up. Explaining why quantum behavior becomes hard to see in large systems with many interacting particles. The process happens extremely fast. If a typical dust grain floating in the air were put in a quantum superposition of two different physical locations separated by about the width of the grain itself, collisions with the air molecules would cause decoherence, making the superposition undetectable in about 10 to the negative 31 seconds. Even in a vacuum, light photons would trigger such decoherence very quickly. You couldn't look at the grain without destroying its superposition. Okay, so let me break for just a second because what they're doing is this is the if you've ever listened to the excuse generation of, let's say, not your religion, but somebody else's religion. And you've listened to somebody else's religion, and you've listened to them talk about why it's true. You'll see that they'll start building more and more bullshit, and until the point at which they kind of overwhelm their ability to understand their cyclical reasoning and recognize the cycle, because the cycle becomes too big. And that's what's kind of going on here with decoherence. Is it's fairly new, and a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon where I'd say it's very near consensus, though not necessarily. But it's very near consensus that decoherence is the newest addition to Copenhagen. So it's basically extending the whole Copenhagen, and instead of saying it's specifically observation that does it, it's interaction over time with enough different things such that the entanglement starts to degrade, and so therefore, because they'd be interfering with each other, all these different possibilities. So let me step a tiny step back here and say, so what they're saying is that the particle exists in these different reality positions, and it's in these different possible places.
Right.
And so when it would interact with this one thing, that should make it go off in this direction. And when it interacts with this other thing, that should, or if it were the other possibility, it should make it go off in that other direction. When enough of those things that are alternate versions of reality, in other words, as reality begins to fucking have all of these divergences that are fucking massive,
right.
That's when the quantumness breaks down, which that's a really handy excuse to say that as reality starts getting more and more fucked up by your theory, that the
Wait, come again? Hold on. They do what now?
Well, I'm not sure what at what
No,
point.
like the transition.
Decoherence.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Because they've said a few times, and it is a fairly new term for me as well. So explain it again, what it is exactly.
Okay, so you have these two spin up and spin down, and so as they explained it, if it's spin up,
explain is a big word. I don't think
as they described it, there is when a particle interacts with another particle, it is then entangled, right? And because of its interaction, they've impacted each other, and each is impacted by the other.
And that sort of makes sense.
So after it interacts with this one particle, it hits this air molecule, whatever, it should bounce left. But if it were in the other state, it should bounce right.
The up versus down?
And the up versus, in these two different possible states that theoretically exist. They both theoretically exist in that particle,
right? Until
because it's not been observed, right?
Because it hasn't been observed.
Right, because it's not been observed, or so it's not collapsed, and so it's in these very. And so as it interacts,
It's in superposition, right?
it's in superposition, right? It's in all. It's all at the same time, all at once. All the different possibilities are all at once.
Just like the cat is both alive and dead.
Yes, just
Right.
like the cat is both alive and dead simultaneously.
Yeah.
So
That.
so as and this is one of the. I mean, this is actually, it's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Decoherence has been, but it's not as.
It's not
For
a
some
buzzword
reason
they
it's-
throw out that often.
Right. I think because it's kind of difficult to understand, it's so hokey and easy to break down that
Okay.
maybe that's why they don't talk about it. You have to really just believe really
Yeah.
hard. So what they're saying is happening is that it as it interacts with other individual particles, those end up disagreeing with each other. So in one case, after a couple of interactions, this particle should have started interacting with this other one or not, based on So
Right.
basically as you have more and more of these branches in what reality should be, and so reality starts branching into vastly different versions of reality that would definitely be obviously observable at the macro scale.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then that's how it breaks down from being in superposition to not. Now that's just basically.
Then it just collapses into whatever it is we
That's
already
just
see.
a long form. Yeah, right. That's just a long form way of saying that the cat couldn't possibly be dead or alive, dead and alive at the same time, because there's too many atoms there that would have to be different.
What?
Yeah, exactly. It's dumb. This is
So am I understanding it correctly? That basically means that what they're trying to say
all
is
the
that
atoms would have to all be.
No. This,
okay, go ahead. What?
that's very, very confusing. The atoms thing is just like, I don't even want to get into that because
Okay, go ahead.
that feels like a completely different topic. Because I'm just such a noob about this. Is it accurate in saying that what you're describing decoherence is, or why they use it, the way they use it is to say all of these crazy things that our theory says are possible that we never observe? Well, that's just because it ended up collapsing in a different way.
Yep, that's basically it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like it's a different form of collapse. It's collapse that happens a little bit at a time. A little bit as
What do you mean a little bit at a time?
Basically it's by interaction, but not a single interaction, but multiple interactions. And then there's some.
It's really hard to keep my head around.
Okay.
Oh boy.
Well, think about that. Think about this. So think about billiard balls, and let's say that these billiard balls have a way of when they interact straight on with one, they can make up the other ball it hits go left or right.
Okay.
Instead of just going straight forward. It's
Sure.
got like a little thing on it that spins it or
Oh,
something.
that's where the atoms are coming from. What you're saying is that the cat can't possibly be both alive and dead because there's a lot of little atoms interacting with each other, and each one of them is deciding left and right,
and they'd all be, and they can't all disagree. Right? It's like you can't have a bunch of. They all have to be in agreement about whether the cat's dead or alive because there's so many of them.
Apparently, you have to vote by consensus, like it's a jury duty. It has
Right.
To be.
It's basically all the atoms get to vote, and once enough of them are different, then it will have come about that they are all the same.
But what
And it's
makes
that there's
them
only one
different?
version of reality. But of course, this begs the question: things are always fucking interacting. So when the
Yeah.
fuck is it ever superposed?
Where's that line?
When is it? No, they should never. Nothing should ever have superposition at that point because everything is always has interacted in the past with other things and would have created a different fucking reality. So there's no point at which anything could be superposed. And so whenever they say that it's just through interactions that the transition from this to this occurs. Well, then they're just not going backwards in
Right.
looking at, well, everything has fucking interacted in the past and is therefore entangled with other things, and so therefore there's no way for it to have ever been superposed then in your explanation.
So that's an arbitrary, kind of like with the Egyptian archaeology. You go back arbitrarily. This is when
We're going to
pharaohs-
arbitrarily halt our regression analysis
Right.
here.
Right here.
Right here. Don't look back. Only look forward from this explanation.
Yep.
Do not look back.
This is where the pharaohs stopped, and regular people ended, and regular people
we only
started.
look forward. Yes. So quite obviously, this shit does not work. This is but basically you just add enough complexity to a faith-based statement. Any faith-based statement, you add enough complexity instead of trying to remove the complexity, you can eventually overload your short-term memory to where you do not realize that you are not properly analyzing the problem. And that's how people can get into the cyclical explanations and these what's it called? That's not even the right circular reasoning. That's how they perform circular reasoning, is that they continue to add to the circle until it is bigger than their total short-term memory. So anyway, so that's what's occurring with this decoherence argument. Is it's just you continue forward. If you add enough math to it and have to work through how their explanation works, it's like you can sit there and get all tied up in the smaller picture of that. Well, each one of these is interacting by this amount that causes this amount of deviation, and so therefore if you combine the deviations of this blah 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 blah, and you get all stuck in that, you'll lose the fact that from the big picture you just lost any ability to ever have superposition in the first place.
Yeah.
Look.
You get fired up about a lot of things.
I do, because I'm just sick of the stupid bullshit.
Right, but,
I'm so
but it's
sick
because
of
you
it.
have a lot of experience in that particular field and I don't, so I'm like, whoa.
Yes,
yeah.
well, anytime that I've had, so yes, I'm not talking about your religion, whoever you are. I'm talking about those other guys' religions. That's wrong. Whenever you listen, you've had a conversation with them and you've seen them do what I'm talking about. So, anyway, let's see. All right. The process by which quantumness disappears into the environment is called decoherence. And it happens in 10 to the negative 31 seconds. You couldn't look at the grain without destroying its superposition. All right. Surprisingly, although decoherence is a straightforward consequence of quantum mechanics, it was identified in the 1970s by the late German physicist Heinz-Dieter Zeh. Zeh. I don't know how to... I probably pronounced that incorrectly. The Polish-American physicist Wojciech Zurek, okay, I know Zurek decoherence, further developed the idea in the early 1980s and made it better known, and there is now good experimental support for it. But to explain the emergence of objective classical reality, it is not enough to say that decoherence washes away quantum behavior and thereby makes it appear classical to an observer. Somehow, it's possible for multiple observers to agree about the properties of quantum systems. Zurek, who works at Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico, argues that two things must therefore be true. So continuing forward on this imaginary path of decoherence,
Yes.
we're going to follow along with them and suspend our disbelief, because that's what's necessary to follow a good story. First, quantum systems must have states that are especially robust in the face of disruptive decoherence by the environment. Zurek calls these pointer states. Okay, say they have to be robust. Quantum systems got to be robust. All right.
Whatever that means.
Sure.
I'm not. I mean.
Oh, okay. Sure.
How
Zurek calls
does
these
one
pointer
define
states.
a robustness of a quantum system?
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay. Because Zurek calls these pointer states because they can be encoded in the possible states of a pointer on the dial of a measuring instrument. A particular location of a particle, for instance, or its speed, the value of its quantum spin, or its polarization direction can be registered as the position of a pointer on a measuring device. Okay, that's only after it's already decohered or collapsed or whatever. Zurek argues that classical behavior, the existence of well-defined, stable, objective properties, is possible only because pointer states of quantum objects exist. So that's saying completely opposite things at the same time. Because if a pointer state already exists, then it's already decohered. It's already, if it has an actual...
Right, but how does he define pointer states? Is that before it decoheres? Is that part of the definition?
Well, he's saying the existence is only... Okay, I don't know. Maybe he's not saying that these exist before measurement, or before the collapse, or before the loss of all the quantum.
It seemed like he did, but I'm not sure.
I don't know. We're gonna have to continue forward because that makes no goddamn sense. What's special mathematically about pointer states is that the decoherence inducing interactions with the environment don't scramble them.
So they're fixed objective things that exist no matter what, is what it sounds like to me.
Then there's no point in talking about decoherence.
Yes. Yep. That's what I'm getting.
He's talking about.
They are fixed
He's talking about.
no matter what.
He's talking about local hidden variables.
Yes.
He's saying local hidden variables exist, which is exactly the whole reason
Classical.
you say you come up with this bullshit is for the purpose of explaining. Oh my god. Oh god. It just pisses me off so much just watching them go in goddamn loop-de-loop bullshit when there are such easy, straightforward explanations for how this
Too
shit
easy.
works.
Too easy, man.
Oh god damn it.
They're on that Occam's razor, which sometimes Occam's razor isn't always the right solution.
Yeah, but they're hating Occam's razor at this point, I guess. Shit. Okay. Driving me fucking crazy with the mental acrobatics. Either the pointer state is preserved or it is simply transformed into a state that looks nearly identical. This implies that the environment doesn't squash quantumness indiscriminately, but selects some states while trashing others.
What? Why?
Why?
You saw how I loved and Jacob how I hated?
Yeah, that's exactly. Just God decided. That's
what
why.
randomly decides
That's
that?
what happened. God decided. All right. A particle's position is resilient to decoherence. For example. Oh, that's a.
One sentence?
That's one sentence. Okay. A particle's position is resilient to decoherence. For example.
It is?
Okay. Sure.
Why?
What? It's because a
we're
position.
arbitrarily deciding stuff,
Decoherence is about. It's explaining how the particle's position goes from being in a fuzzy state to being in a non-fuzzy state. And they're saying that it's resilient to decoherence, but decoherence is how it goes from. What the fuck? Superpositions of different locations, however, are not pointer states. Interactions with the environment decohere them into localized pointer states so that only one can be observed.
So their position or speed or whatever is a pointer state, but then other things are not pointer states, and sometimes all the things are pointer states, and sometimes none of them are. Oh no. I think you're breaking. I detected touch of madness.
It's just because I've watched this shit happen in so many different ways. People go off on such crazed goddamn tangents about quantum woo bullshit when De Broglie-Bohm explains it so goddamn clearly. Oh God, it's just like they've jumped through their asshole to accomplish something that's unnecessary. Fucking shit. All right.
Maybe they're enjoying it's not about the destination, it's the journey, man.
Yeah, it's the journey. They just love making up some crazy self-conflicting bullshit. What's special mathematically about pointer states is that the decoherence inducing interactions with the environment don't scramble them.
Because they're special.
Okay.
The God's little chosen atoms.
So let's say that what they're trying to say here is that a pointer state is that it.
Something that cannot be altered ever because it exists objectively.
But that's inferring local hidden variables.
Yes,
How
because
the
quantum
fuck?
Darwinism is supposed to try to. I think they're trying to get to reality.
Yeah, but you
That's a baby
can't
step.
infer local hidden variables without dealing with all the other shit. That completely blows away everything Copenhagen, utterly. And the whole reason to come up with the decoherence is to explain Copenhagen.
Well, they don't know that.
Ah, Jesus Christ. I mean, I agree with local hidden variables to
Yeah.
a certain extent, but it's not that in the way that there's a non-locality to the... Fuck it. I'm not going to explain De Broglie-Bohm and how it works right now.
I'm getting such...
Fucking goddamn it.
This is a physics version of Chris Regan flipping out about feminism. It's like,
I'm not going there right now. I'm not doing it right now. No, I'm not. Fuck. All right.
I love your rants.
This implies that the environment doesn't squash quantumness. Okay.
Nope. It doesn't. It loves it. It loves it so much.
Let's go. Let's read that again.
Okay.
Special about pointer states is that the decoherence-inducing interactions with the environment don't scramble them.
Yep, they're special.
So he's basically, right now, the only way I can understand that is for him to be saying that there's local hidden variables. But I'm going to try to believe somehow it's not. I'm going to believe that. I'm just going to...
variables that are immune to being affected by quantumness is what it is.
All right. Either the pointer state is preserved or it is simply transformed into a state that looks nearly identical. This implies that the environment doesn't squash quantumness indiscriminately, but will select some states while trashing others.
Says who? Why?
A particle's position is resilient to decoherence, for example. Superpositions of different locations, however, are not pointer states.
Therefore, they can be changed.
A particle's position is resilient to decoherence.
Right. That's one pointer state that cannot be altered ever by anything, it seems like.
Hold on. No, just wait. A particle's position is resilient to decoherence, for example. Superpositions of different locations, however, are not pointer states.
So position is a pointer state. Superposition is not. And sometimes it does change, but to stay virtually identical, so you can't even tell, but you know that it changed. But you can't tell.
Well, he's treating a superposition as though it's different from a position.
Yes.
I mean, that they're...
Yes.
I think this may be the writer.
Yes.
Because when I read Zurich's paper, I did not get this fucking pissed off.
True.
I was a little pissed off, but I was not this pissed off. I think this is the writer.
Could be.
I think that's the problem.
Okay. He looks like the actor from The Way of Heaven.
Okay. Interactions with the environment decohere them into localized pointer states so that only one can be observed. Zurich described this environment-induced superselection of pointer states in the 1980s. It has been a while since I read Zurich's paper. I might have to read it again. Maybe that's what we ought to be doing, is reading fucking Zurich's paper.
Well, we can skip that and go to the other two, because there's three experiments that they're talking about here.
Okay. I'm looking for the ways that he's not contradicting himself here, and I'm just not finding a way he's not contradicting himself.
Mm-hmm. Interactions
with the environment decohere them into localized pointer states so that well, now I'm so pissed. I can't get into his headspace right now because I'm too pissed off. I got to try to get into this guy's headspace. Hold on, I can do this.
Put on your porn star training. You got this.
I got this. All right. A particle's position is resilient to decoherence. Superpositions are not. Okay, a superposition is just multiple positions. Mm-hmm. All the positions that it's supposed to be in. So that's just fucking ridiculous. So getting aside, and I'm just going to pay no attention to that ridiculous statement. And now, interactions with the environment decohere them into localized pointer states. Okay. So that only one can be observed. So what they're saying is that the superposition, he's kind of acting like the superposition only exists across a wide area. That's what he's inferring here. The superposition only exists across a wide area instead of locally. So that only one can be observed. So what he's saying is that superposition exists across that wide area, but actual position is local. That's what he's inferring with these words. And I think that's how this writer understands it, and I do not trust that this writer actually understands anything about this properly. Okay. So there's like multiple levels of people's stories. This is a story told by somebody who's telling somebody else's story, which none of it makes any damn sense in the first place. All right. But there's a second condition to that, that a quantum property must meet to be observed. Although immunity to interaction with the environment assures the stability of a pointer state, we still have to get at the information about it somehow. We can do that only if it gets imprinted in the object's environment. When you see an object, for example, that information is delivered to your retina by the photons scattering off of it. They carry information to you in the form of a partial replica of certain aspects of the object, saying something about its position, shape, and color. Lots of replicas are needed if many observers are to agree on a measured value. A hallmark of classicality. I don't really see that as a hallmark of classicality per se. It's just that that reality is the same to lots of different people. Yeah, that's true. Thus, and that's part of the problem, is these people are completely embroiled. Their brain is completely infected with postmodernism. They do not believe reality is a unitary thing. They believe there's all these false realities that are not really in contact with each other. And they're not even really dependent on each other. It's just like all of it. That's everybody's
that's the basis of a lot of the quantum theories, though.
Yeah, I know. That's why this problem. That's, like I said, exploded. Everything exploded at quantum theory, where people's mind, where they merged postmodernism and physics, and that's what happened. And so people literally, their minds actually, they don't believe in a unified reality. They do not believe that there is one.
They don't believe in hierarchy.
They are solipsistic at the core of their mind and how their mind works. Yeah. They don't think that there is any. They think that there are all these conflicting realities out there that are completely in conflict with each other. And so that is their view of reality, is that there isn't one.
And that some observer.
And that somehow across the vast gulfs between me and you, our realities collide and create a shared reality, but only in certain parts, and kind of, so it decoheres.
Ever affects anyone else.
It doesn't really. Yes, I can do anything. It doesn't really affect other people because they're in their own universe aside from my own.
Something's affecting me, and then their shared universes is.
Their shared universe is impinging upon mine. Yes. How dare they? No, that's the problem is it's literally infected people's minds where they do not believe that any kind of unified reality exists.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on with this writer.
Well, I mean, we could, might, I meant to open a separate tab. This might be the actual paper, but yeah.
No, that's Quantum Darwin.
Hubert Zurich, but by Zurich.
Oh.
Yeah.
When? 2009.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a 2009 paper.
Okay.
All right. All right, so let's just slog forward.
Let's just fucking punch through that. Oh, cool, we have chat.
Yeah, you want to look at the chat?
I mean, sure we can.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't do shit. You're in my seat. Oh. So you have to look at chat.
Oh, you can't look at it online?
No,
okay.
No, it's all on that computer.
I got you. All right.
Yeah, I'm without hands or arms or legs or anything if I'm not by that computer.
So decohere them into localized polar states is what happens when they interact, and this is environment-induced super selection. Sure. So this is basically kind of so the idea that it looks like this writer is what his idea of what Zurich's idea was. Is that there is that superposition is all of these possible interactions. The particle could have gone off this way, could have gone off that way, and there's this whole area of effect that is possible, but locally, but it only exists at out there in that area as a superposition, but locally at each subposition, that represents the whole of that superposition, there is a existing, real state kind of. So this is kind of like local hidden variables with some of this is like a half mix between Copenhagen and local hidden variables.
Which is classical.
Well, they're basically making it non-local hidden variables. In other words, the hidden variable is that it is local hidden variables. No, it's definitely local and non-local. In other words, that they're saying that the particle exists in all those other positions as a superposition, and it exists in each one of those positions as a real thing simultaneously. That's kind of what he's saying here. wow, stuff. Following people around in their schizophrenia is just such a fucking pain in the ass. All right. So I'll continue following him through his schizophrenia. All right. But there's a second condition that a quantum property must meet to be observed. Although immunity to interaction with the environment assures the stability of a pointer state, we still have to get the information about it somehow. We can do that only if it gets imprinted on the object's environment. When you see an object, for example, that information is delivered to your retina by photons scattering off of it. They carry information to you in the form of a partial replica. And that's what, and I already read all this and I'm not going to read it again. Okay. And so it's, well, okay, no, I stopped right here. There it is. So you get the position, shape, and color. Lots of replicas are needed if many observers are to agree on a measured value. Thus, as Zurich argued in the 2000s, our ability to observe some property depends not only on whether it is selected as a pointer state, but also on how substantial a footprint it makes in the environment. The states that are best at creating replicas in the environment, the fittest, you might say, are the only ones accessible to measurement. That's why Zurich calls the idea quantum Darwinism. So, what they're saying is,
That's Zurich's thing, it seems like.
yeah, this is his second paper. I think I read his first.
Quantum Darwinism in general seems to be his thing. Yeah.
Yes, that's what it looks like. So, what he's saying here is that the more it impacts the environment, okay, so the more the superposition, so it's like creating all of these various virtual copies of itself all over the place, in its actual existence, because the truth of the matter is this now means that the particle, any given particle, could be in a wide variety of places,
Right.
like huge fucking distances even, once they get far, after enough interactions. But then the point is that, well, reality won't allow it to interact too many times before it'll end up in reducing it down to one single state. Oh God, it's fucking ridiculous. So the total footprint it makes in the environment, so the number of interactions it has, basically, because it's creating more copies of itself. That's what he's trying to say. Superposition is just all these weird copies of a single thing end up all over the fucking place, and the more it has impacted things, the more copies it's kind of made of itself, then that's going to be the fittest, and that makes it where you can observe it. It's such crap. All right, trying to take something that's nonsensical and make it make sense is fucking killing me. All right. It turns out that the same stability property that promotes an environment-induced superselection of pointer states also promotes quantum Darwinian fitness, or the capacity to generate replicas. Leprechauns. The capacity to generate leprechauns. No, it turns out the same stability property that promotes environment-induced superselection. So what is the stability property? That is the pointer selection thing, right?
Yeah.
Also promotes quantum Darwinian fitness, or the capacity to generate replicas. The environment, through its monitoring efforts, decoheres systems. Zurich said. And the very same process that is responsible for decoherence should inscribe multiple copies of the information in the environment. What?
Just your reaction.
Oh God, let's just continue
trying so
forward.
hard.
Let's just go forward. All right. Information overload. It doesn't matter, of course, whether information about a quantum system that gets imprinted on the environment is actually read out by a human observer. All that matters for classical behavior to emerge is that that information get there so that it could be read out in principle.
Okay.
A system doesn't have to be understudy in any formal sense to become classical, said Jess Rydell, a physicist at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics in Waterloo, Canada, and a proponent of quantum Darwinism. QD putatively explains or helps to explain all of classicality, including everyday macroscopic objects that aren't in a laboratory that existed before there were any humans. So the idea here is that the environment does the process of the observer in Copenhagen. That the environment, by the nature of the fact that the superposition of states has to interact with so many things and cause so many fucking versions of reality that would be conflicting, that eventually reality says fucking no and collapses it down to only one reality. And so it's a measure, decoherence is a measure of how much it's interacted. That makes it more of a real state, which again makes it so there could never be superposition.
Yep. So they're just getting rid of superposition. Cool.
Yes. Well, no. Or superposition only exists in a tiny little location before it's interacted, but it interacted earlier, and so therefore it's already entangled.
Right.
No. Don't think that far back.
That
Don't go backwards like that. Go only forward. About a decade ago, while Rydell was working as a graduate student with Zurich, the two showed theoretically that information from some simple idealized quantum system is copied prolifically into the environment. Rydell said, so that it is necessary to access only a small amount of the environment to infer the value of the variables. They calculated that a grain of dust, 1 micrometer across, after being illuminated by the sun for just 1 microsecond, will have its location imprinted about 100 million times in the scattered photons. Okay. It's because of this redundancy that objective, classical-like properties exist at all. That is nonsense because we're talking about subatomic particles in the first place are the ones that have the superposition. That's where it's most relevant, not in full micrometer-sized objects. And so it's, which theoretically it's like, yeah, that's why they're not superposed, because they're because they can impact more of reality. And so it's just this excuse without any reason that the more that it can impact reality, the more that it has interaction with the rest of reality, the more it is one single state. And so if it's not impacting a lot of reality, then it's not in one single state. But if it does impact a lot of reality because it is bigger, then it's then it's in a more of a fuzzy state. God damn, jumping through your asshole. Just,
I swear. It's already annoying.
The mental acrobatics. I know, we already have enough mental acrobatics, and adding this on top of it is just so fucking annoying. All right. It's because of this, and it's just whenever they come up with excuses for, it's like, well, the reason 759 angels can dance on the head of a pin is because 759 is, you have to, each foot is exactly this wide, and there is when you take the atoms and you compare them, the conformation of the type of metal. Now, it is dependent upon the type of metal that you have, that the pin is made out of, for the angels dancing on that. Oh, God, shut up. It's because of this redundancy that objective classical-like properties exist at all. 10 observers can each measure the position of a dust grain and find that it's in the same location because each can access a distant replica of the information. In this view, we can assign an objective position to the speck not because it has such a position, whatever that means, but because its position state can imprint many identical replicas on the environment so that different observers can reach a consensus. It's just a re-explanation of what I said before, that the more it's able to impact reality because it's fucking bigger, the more reality allows it to be one single thing. That's what they're getting at.
What do you mean bigger? I don't understand.
Okay, so he says a speck of dust, which is made up of numerous atoms. Because light can bounce off of it, more copies of that piece of dust can be made, more people can look, and more things could possibly observe and therefore interact with the information coming off of
how does
that.
that mean that more copies are going to be made like that?
Yes, it's
Just
bullshit.
just what
It's,
they
yeah,
decided to?
just believe really hard,
Got it.
because it doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't matter how small it is, it'll still make lots of copies can be
Yeah.
made of a single atom too.
Right.
Well, except yeah, down in a subatomic particle, you can't make multiple copies of a given particle
They're
because
all
it requires
unique.
because it's quantum, because it's the smallest particle. So therefore, only one particle could impact with that other particle, and therefore you can only make one additional copy. So therefore, the number of copies that you can produce is reduced. So yeah, I can see how that argument could be used. It's fucking stupid, but it can be used. So and then even and then after it's that one photon or one electron is interacted with another, then you've already changed its actual location or state, or so because of that, you can't make multiple copies of it, and so therefore it can't interact with as much of the environment. So just arbitrarily believe that it just has to do with this without any mechanism for why it does so. It just does. This is a new explanation that we're just gotta swallow.
New.
Yes, on top of the other bullshit that we have to swallow.
How much more do we have of this?
Just swallow just gallons and gallons of bullshit.
I
Just
can
open up
swallow a
water.
big load, but
Yes.
it's starting to reach my limit, man.
Yeah, okay.
Anytime you're ready to take a break for comments, we can.
Yeah, let's take a break for comments.
Yeah,
sure,
let's
do that.
Let's change things up. Let's move around.
Yeah.
Let's.
All right, I love it.
Stretch
Because we're
our
about to get to now. They're
legs.
about to start talking about the experiment. So
When-
we needed to talk. We needed
Oh,
to
boy.
understand their theory.
Oh, we're hitting our second hour though.
Okay. Well,
We might need to do this next Monday.
Sure.
Because good lord. All right, let's see. Oh, never mind. They're not comments.
Oh, okay. I thought there were
Ah, no, they're trash.
comments.
The only quantum I know is called bacula leaping in and out of people.
Yeah, it's true.
Something caused a huge fight at Thanksgiving this year. Probably the quantum. Yep, no comments.
Okay. Well, then we'll continue forward. You want to read now?
I guess, sure.
We're about done with the theory now. We really
Alright.
we've boiled down the theory to the more something can react with a bunch of stuff, the less it's quantum fuzziness. That's what it comes back down to. But using a whole lot of words to say that this arbitrary idea that if it interacts with a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
if it can interact with a lot of stuff, it's more certain that it's in a given place, which is just a focus on collections. Because what about the individual atoms of that particular mode of dust? What about those individual subatomic particles that are in that mode of dust? So we're saying that the mode of dust is in one particular place,
All right.
but the particles are not.
What do you mean?
The exactly. The particles are still superposed, but the mode of dust isn't. No.
Because it's
Bigger.
concrete.
Because it's bigger.
It's got pointers. Because yeah, quantum means small, and so when it's bigger, it doesn't apply to quantum rules
Yeah,
anymore.
exactly. That's how it breaks the rules.
Oh yeah, so you guys, this is him smoking 10 joints, taking all the calming pills ever, and he still gets that riled up. This is him this is him in a coma. He's actually in a coma right now. And he still gets that frustrated about dumb shit that is literally impeding our progress as a society, as a species. Half of the problems that we currently have in the world stem from
Look,
this.
It comes. If we just had our fucking physics right, we would have massive surpluses of energy. Massive surpluses of energy is massive wealth. Period. That's all there is to it.
We wouldn't be sending guns to Saudi Arabia,
That's
would
why
we?
we fight over oil.
Exactly.
Because oil is wealth. It is wealth. It's energy. Wealth is an energy fucking it's
Equation.
It's an energy equation, exactly. And so when if we had our physics right, we would be able to store and generate and far more efficiently distribute and do all the things dealing with energy, exponentially better. And so because of that, we have far less wealth.
We have untold suffering and way less wealth than we could.
Yes, the whole world would be
just unbelievably more wealthy than it is right now because the availability of the energy is far, 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 far greater than people actually understand we are capable of harnessing.
Yep. True that. So this is important. It's the reason we talk about this. All right. Where are we at? Redundancy. You have to monitor such environments.
Yeah. What's more? That's where we're at.
What's more, you don't have to monitor much of the environment to gather most of the available information, and you don't gain significantly more by monitoring more than a fraction of the environment. Quote, the information one can gather about the system quickly saturates, end quote, Riedel said. Did we read that quote? Quantum Darwinism putatively explains or helps to explain all of classicality, including everyday macroscopic objects that aren't in laboratory or that existed before they were in human cells.
Yeah, that was from earlier.
Yeah. This redundancy is the distinguishing feature of quantum Darwinism, explained Mauro Paternostro, a physicist at Queen's University Belfast, who was involved in one of the 3 new experiments. It's the property that characterizes the transition towards classicality. The fact that the system's redundant, I guess? But they didn't really ever talk about the system being redundant before. They just suddenly introduced that.
No, they've been talking about it's that you basically can create more copies of a larger object because more can interact with it.
Oh, okay.
And so more photons can interact with a mode of dust and create a copy of it. And so that means that mode of dust can interact with more of reality. But that's basically treating the mode of dust as if it's one thing and not recognizing that a mode of dust, what exactly defines one mode of dust since it's a collection of particles. Mm-hmm. And so it's just bullshit from start to finish. But we just continue forward with their bullshit. This is their story. This is their magic story. Let's listen to their magic story.
Quantum Darwinism challenges a common myth about quantum mechanics, according to the theoretical physicist Adán Cabello at the University of Seville in Spain. Namely, that the transition between the quantum and classical worlds is not understood, and that measurement outcomes cannot be described by quantum theory. On the contrary, he said, quantum theory perfectly describes the emergence of the classical world.
Okay, sure it does.
Just how perfectly remains contentious, however. Some researchers think decoherence and QD provide a complete account of the quantum classical transition. But although these ideas attempt to explain why superpositions vanish at large scales and why only concrete classical properties remain, there's still the question of why measurements give unique outcomes. Maybe because you're measuring crazy things. When a particular location of a particle is selected, what happens to the other possibilities inherent in its quantum description? Were they ever in any sense real? Researchers are compelled to adopt philosophical interpretations of quantum mechanics precisely because no one can figure out a way to answer that question experimentally.
Wrong. We fucking found the way to describe that shit experimentally through the Coudet experiments. And
you're talking about the particle wave duality.
Yes, wave particle duality makes perfect fucking sense.
Because that's something that they're talking about on a large scale. So on a quantum level, we have a wave particle duality because of probability. Mm-hmm. If I'm understanding correctly, to explain in layman's terms.
What their idea is?
Right, in layman's terms, their idea is that on a small scale thing, there's superposition, there's quantum indeterminacy, there's all of the uncertainty until it collapses. We don't know anything. However, when we look at a larger scale, like things are pretty concrete. Things are happening. They're there. Right. There's no. The cat isn't alive and dead.
So basically, they are more concrete because they're bigger. Bigger things are solid because they're bigger.
So in other words, we never.
It's completely cyclical. Circular reasoning? Yes,
and so we never get to see the wave particle duality on any scale larger than the very small.
Right.
And so they're like, well, that's because
it's small.
Except we have Coudet that shows a large silicon droplet behaving like an atom. Wave particle duality.
Subatomic particle. Actually, right. They behave like the droplets behave like subatomic particles. all the various behaviors of the way in which they entangle and the way in which they have coherence, and they have all these various properties that
Assigned to the quantum world.
right, and it's because the particles themselves, their existence is emergent and therefore non-local. And that's the problem, is people don't understand what the term non-local means. They think it means that it exists, that it exists in multiple places, like distant from each other. But no, it's just that the information and the required
It's like a hologram.
Basically, exactly. It's like a hologram. That is what's true. That reality is like a hologram. That is the thing that fucking works. That's the only thing that works. And it's shown in the Coudet experiments and in the silicon walkers. And and just because there's one fucking scientific establishment. They recently come out with this, where it's Bohr's fucking grandson, which Bohr's whole legacy is Copenhagen interpretation, came out with some experiments where they, Bohr's grandson, failed to replicate the Coudet, the only one of the Coudet experiments, and there's tons of them and lots of different quantum behaviors. But because this one two-slit experiment that he tried to replicate and failed, they've literally started publishing articles that pilot wave is completely disproven. That's such complete epic bullshit. I mean, god damn, how do they look themselves in the mirror knowing that they're so completely and utterly fucking full of shit?
I don't think they know. I don't think they know.
No, there's no way. As in, you can't have the slightest scientific mind at all whatsoever.
Well, that's the thing. I don't think they have a scientific mind. It's just like bless Hank Green. But most of the time, whenever there's a reason we haven't watched that science show, SciShow, because like they just regurgitate a paragraph that some scientist, science journalist gave them, and they don't have a science mind.
Yeah,
they have
sure.
a conventionalism mind.
Well,
they
yeah,
have
they-
appeals
yeah.
to authority mind.
They have a faith-based mind. In
Yeah.
other words, whatever is believed by the group that is the authority is what I believe.
Exactly. So they don't
Whatever
actually
group
have.
I view as authority, they have the truth.
Very few journalists of scientific type will actually have integrity because they don't know. They don't know any better.
Yeah.
So you can't. The word integrity doesn't even apply because they're dupes. But yeah. Anyway, into the lab. Quantum Darwinism looks fairly persuasive on paper. I don't know about that.
No,
but
it doesn't.
Maybe to you, I suppose. But until recently, that was as far as it got. In the past year, and this was this year in July, published article. In the past year, 3 teams of researchers have independently put the theory to the experimental test by looking for its key features. How a quantum system imprints replicas of itself on its environment.
So first
Why
off,
is that even the key feature in the first place?
Okay, so first off, that's trying to prove something does exist, which is you have to be showing how something. The most important experiments in science are falsifications. You
Right.
take a theory and you try to falsify it, not so much try to prove it, because trying to prove it
It's called experimental or error.
the experimenter effect. You
Yeah.
can always, anything you set out to prove, you almost
You
certainly
can.
will.
Yeah.
Okay, that's part of what pseudoscience is when you set out to prove something, you typically will prove it because you will set it up with your expectations, and your interpretation of those expectations will obviously come out the way that you intended from the first place because of your belief in it. So that's why, for instance, people of other people's religion, not your religion, other people's religion will have these ideas of their evidence that they've proven these certain things about their religion that it is true. Then you'll always see it. It's like they have the experimenter effect. You can recognize it in others, but not your religion.
No.
Other people's religion.
Definitely. So let's look at these experiments in the lab. I believe it was Italian, German, and Chinese. That's right. The experiments depended on the ability to closely monitor what information about a quantum system gets imparted to its environment. Whatever that means. That's not feasible for, say, a dust grain floating among countless billions of air molecules. So 2 of the teams created a quantum object in a kind of artificial environment, in quotes, with only a few particles in it. Both experiments, one by Paternostro and collaborators at Sapienza University of Rome, and the other by the quantum information expert Jianwei Pan and co-authors at the University of Science and Technology of China, use a single photon as the quantum system, with a handful of other photons serving as the environment that interacts with it and broadcasts information about it. Already have a problem with this. Seems like it should be more than photons that it would interact with as its environment. Otherwise, you're an environment of your own clones, and the whole point is to observe your own clones.
And you can't tell one photon from another.
And isn't there like
and there's so many assumptions? There's so many assumptions based on Copenhagen interpretation already in the theories used to do what it is that they're doing. So there's a tremendous, there's so many layers of assumption already in the experiment. Let's go forward from there. Just layer after layer after layer after layer of assumption.
It's a 3D printer of assumptions.
Yes. It's a 3D printed object of assumptions. Yes. All these layers of assumptions, all relying upon one another, that are in the experimental setup to start. Okay, let's go forward from there.
You know, a 3D print is a better analogy than an onion for a person, because it comes up with, it starts out with layers, but then it's just one thing. And you really can't peel back those layers without breaking it. I don't know what I'm talking about. This fucking thing is, wow. This has been a challenge. This has been the most challenging CherrySTEM I've ever done personally.
Yes, it's been.
This has been particularly challenging for me. Between boredom and confusion and frustration and confusion, I don't know what to feel anymore.
I know, that's the part. It's so hard to slog through other people's schizophrenic shit. I mean, it's so.
At least if it was entertaining and like off the wall shit, but this is just like.
But it's slogging through other people's
like
schizophrenic
boring
shit.
Schizophrenic shit.
It's like investigating other people's religions. That it's like you get to sit there and just.
But hey, with Scientology, at least we get Xenu. With fucking Mormonism, we got Golden Tablet. There's at least fun things.
But imagine if you had to go and really, really learn Scientology really, really well, because they've got and they just keep building onto it, building onto it. But every religion, whenever they have a belief system, they keep building excuses.
I don't know. I'm particularly curious about religions because they are a person's inner mind. But I will find that forever fascinating.
But not necessarily a specific one. No. You haven't gone into it and looked into all the excuse
generation. The Pentecostal versus
and they have to sit there and they spiral off into billions. Yeah. That's how schizophrenia works. Is they spiral off into billions of excuse generations that just keep them from ever going and finding where the problems are. And as they spiral off into these just zillions, and you have to follow them down each and every one of these paths, and they keep making new ones, and keep adding on and adding on and adding on and adding on to their schizophrenic shit. And that's and so yes, it's extremely difficult to slog through this shit.
Yeah, I guess if I think about it, I mean, I don't mean to single out Pentecostals in particular. It's just I don't know that many of those words. There's like what evangelical, Pentecostal, Catholic, like Baptist, Catholic. There's a lot of.
There are Christian denominations within lots of religions.
Right. So when I think about it, and then of course think about like African religions or Indian religions, yeah, it's like there's so many splinter cells that thinking about going down each individual path and learning to the T all the specifics of each one, that would be quite the slog indeed.
Yeah, and that you have to know each and every specific to even talk to them about it.
Right. Otherwise, you're just ignorant and you have no right to speak.
Yeah, you have no right. How do you know?
I have a better example.
Know our special schizophrenic
feminism.
pile of shit.
Feminism and all of it's splinter religions. Now
my particular gargantuan story of schizophrenic shit that spiraled off into crazy nonsense to head off any discussion of how this is completely fucking irrational.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can't
pardon my yawning. It's just really hard, guys.
You can't criticize it.
Right, that's the thing with feminism, is that there's all these splinter religions in feminism as well, and so you cannot criticize or even talk to them unless you believe the exact specific tenets which change day to day. Thinking about keeping up with all that, yeah, I'm having no, please, no. But that's exactly what we're doing, but for physics. All right. Okay. So we're already sure. Single photon as the quantum system with a handful of other photons serving as the environment. Dumbest setup ever, whatever. Both teams passed laser photons through optical devices that could combine them into multiply entangled groups. Sure. They then interrogated the environment photons to see what information they encoded about the system's photons' pointer state. In this case, it's polarization. the orientation of its oscillating electromagnetic fields. One of the quantum properties able to pass through the filter of quantum Darwinian selection, because they arbitrarily decided which pointers pass and which ones don't.
God, the layers.
A key prediction of QD is the saturation effect. Pretty much all the information you can gather about the quantum system should be available if you monitor just a handful of surrounding particles. Okay, now the whole saturation is sort of starting to coalesce. Any small fraction of the interacting environment is enough to provide the maximal classical information about the observed system concept. The two teams found precisely this. Measurements of just one of the environment photons revealed a lot of the available information about the system photon's polarization, and measuring an increasing fraction of the environment photons provided diminishing returns. So wait a minute. How do they know that they're not just entangled? And
They don't.
since they're all photons, how do they decide
it's
that?
basically it's behaving like local hidden variables? Yeah, of course
Right.
it's behaving like local
How
hidden
did?
variables.
Why did they decide that it was this one photon impacting the other photons versus that they're all just entangled?
It's
and-
just there's too many layers
Yeah,
of
okay,
fucking
whatever, fine.
presumption.
Okay.
You just have to continue forward and say sure, yeah, sure with that, sure. There's plot holes you could drive a fucking planet through, and it's it's just like watching a really bad sci-fi movie.
That just looks janky as shit.
That's the jankiest experiment I've ever seen.
High quality experimentation.
A team led by Fedor Giselka, director of University of Quantum Optics at Ulm University in Germany, probed the state of a nitrogen defect inside a synthetic diamond shown mounted on that's a diamond, mounted on the right. Why is it mounted on a chunk of glass that they broke out of a window? I don't understand.
It's very small.
Nope. They found precisely this. Measurements of just one of the environment photons revealed a lot of the available information about the system's photons polarization, and measuring an increasing fraction of the environment photons provided diminishing returns. Even a single photon can act as an environment that introduces decoherence and selection, Pan explained, if it interacts strongly enough with a lone system photon. When the interactions are weaker, a larger environment must be monitored. The third experiment test of QD, led by quantum optical physicist Fedor Giselka.
So basically, what they're finding is everything acts as though it's got local hidden variables, and that it's already basically everything's acting as though it's completely deterministic, and there is no fucking superposition.
Yes.
That's the interpretation I get.
Yep. Too.
But what do you know? They're not going to have that interpretation, are they?
But it's all right because we got the interpretations. The second half of a study. The results are the first half. So once you have the results, you can certainly introduce a different interpretation, and it's just as fucking valid if it, accurately sums up the results. So the fact that this exists the way it does is great. Just for the results being like, there's all these fucking concrete variables that don't change because they're determined beforehand by the system being mechanical. Great. The third experiment of QD, led by quantum optical physicist Fedor Giselka at Ulm University in Germany, in collaboration with Zurich and others, used a very different system and environment, consisting of a lone nitrogen atom, so bigger now, we're not photons, we're going up to atoms, substituting for a carbon atom in a crystalline lattice of a diamond, a so-called nitrogen vacancy defect. Because the nitrogen atom has one more electron than carbon, this excess electron cannot pair up with those on neighboring carbon atoms to form a chemical bond. As a result, the nitrogen atom's unpaired electron acts as a lone spin, which is like an arrow pointing up or down in general in a superposition of both possible directions. This spin can interact magnetically with those of the roughly 0.3% of the carbon nuclei present in the diamond, as the isotope carbon-13, which unlike the more abundant carbon-12, also has spin.
So you
And
have
that's
to
a
first
quantum
believe
thing.
in the superposition.
And they have to believe in spin as a quantum thing.
Right.
On average, each nitrogen vacancy spin is stronger coupled to 4 carbon-13 spins with a distance of about 1 nanometer. By controlling and monitoring the spins using lasers and radio frequency pulses, the researchers could measure how a change in the nitrogen spin is registered by changes in the nuclear spins of the environment. As they reported in a preprint last September, they too observed the characteristic redundancy predicted by QD. The state of the nitrogen spin is recorded
quote unquote, as multiple copies in the surroundings and the information about the spin saturates quickly as more of the environment is considered. I'm gonna hand it over to you in just a second.
No, I gotta use the bathroom. But yeah, it's just yes. So it acts as though it's real instead of a fuzzy nonsense thing. That's what they're seeing over and over. It acts as though it's real. Not fuzzy quantum woo woo. It's there's real things underlying reality. It's real unified fucking reality.
Zurich says that because should I how deeply are you using the bathroom?
Let me use the bathroom real quick. Go ahead.
Because you won't hear me reading. I'm not reading to you.
Okay.
And you can't hear.
I have to use the bathroom now. That's just
Okay.
necessary.
Well,
So you can
leave the door?
No. Continue reading. It's fine. Don't worry.
Zurich says that because the photon experiments create copies in an artificial way that stimulates. Zurich says that because the photon experiments create copies in an artificial way that simulates an actual environment, they don't incorporate a selection process that. No, God damn it. I can't do this. We're going to take a little break, you guys. Actually, I don't have a break screen. Fuck. Let's have a quick Patreon ad.
That didn't sound good. Okay.
I had to go on a break. I can't do this without you.
Okay, well, it's just 1 second.
I have to go.
Okay.
Okay.
And we're back, right?
And we're back.
Okay.
I mean, we were there.
All right.
Fucking fuck. Jesus, fuck.
So at this point, it's really,
Okay.
yeah. I think
Almost there.
I
Almost
think
there.
we've belabored the point.
Just
It's-
almost there. Hold on. It's like, oh Jesus. All right, almost. Just this
let's
last
leave-
thing.
Sure. Well, let's read the end of it. What's the wind up and the pitch?
So who cares what the Zurich says? Whatever, sure. Says the diamond scheme also says, the Zurich says that because the photon experiments create copies in an artificial way that simulates an actual environment, they don't incorporate a selection process that picks out natural pointer states resilient to decoherence. So Zurich doesn't like this. Rather, the researchers themselves impose the pointer states. In contrast, the diamond environment does elicit pointer states. Quote, the diamond scheme also has problems because of the size of the environment, but at least it is, well, natural. So Zurich has an issue with these things.
Okay, sure. Good for him.
He definitely, I don't like that photon environment either. That's fucking retarded.
Yeah.
But the diamond one's
because
okay.
it's all fucking stupid.
Yeah.
It's all a bunch of idiocy.
Generalizing quantum Darwinism. So far, so good for quantum Darwinism. Didn't Zurich just say, quote, all these studies see what is expected at least approximately, Zurich said.
What do you know? They see what's expected? Approximately? Great.
Wow,
great.
that's a well-designed
Science.
experiment.
Fucking science, man. Woo! You're doing science now.
Riedel says,
That's an experiment. It's science.
yeah.
Science is so fucking good.
Riedel says we could hardly expect otherwise, though.
Yeah, no shit.
In his view, QD is really just the careful and systematic application of standard quantum mechanics to the interaction of a quantum system with its environment. Although this is virtually impossible to do in practice for most quantum measurements, I lost my spot. Oh, although it is virtually impossible to do in practice for most quantum measurements, if you can sufficiently simplify a measurement, the predictions are clear, he said. QD is most like an internal self-consistency check on quantum theory itself.
No.
Because if you sufficiently simplify it, then you get the answer you want.
Sure.
Science!
Science. That's it. Everybody go home. We got it all figured out.
But although these studies seem consistent with QD, they can't be taken as proof that it is the sole description of the emergence of classicality, or even that it's wholly correct. For one thing,
Or that it's
says,
even correct in the slightest.
for one
Or
thing,
that it makes any sense.
For one thing, says Cabello, the 3 experiments offer only schematic versions of what a real environment consists of. What's more, the experiments don't cleanly rule out other ways to view the emergence of classicality. A theory called spectrum broadcasting, for example, developed by Paweł Chodorowski at the Gdańsk University of Technology in Poland and collaborators, attempted to generalize QD. Spectrum broadcast theory, which only has been worked through for a few idealized cases, identifies those states of an entangled quantum system and environment that provide objective information that many observers can obtain without perturbing it. In other words, it aims to ensure not just that different observers can access replicas of the system in the environment, but that by doing so they don't affect the other replicas. That too is a feature of genuinely classical measurement. Horodecki and the other theorists have also sought to embed QD in a theoretical framework that doesn't demand any arbitrary division of the world into a system and its environment, but just considers how classical a reality can emerge from interactions between various quantum systems. Paternostro says it might be challenging to find experimental methods capable of identifying the rather subtle distinction between the predictions of these theories. Still, researchers are trying, and the very attempt should refine our ability to probe the workings of the quantum realm. Quote, the best argument for performing these experiments probably is that they are good exercise, end quote, Riegel said. Quote, directly illustrating QD can require some very difficult measurements that will push the boundaries of existing laboratory techniques, end quote. The only way we can find out what measurement really means, it seems, is by making better measurements.
Sure. Not by actually, questioning whether
Having
or
a
not
theory.
what you're doing is fucking rational or not. Just to rationally fuck around with shit and come up with crazy, bullshit and excuse generation, and everything will work out all right. That's a good, use of our scientific money and time and effort. Yeah, sure.
Science.
Science, bitches.
Oh boy. That was a lot.
Yeah, we scienced so fucking good, man. Woo!
We scienced extra hard.
We scienced the hardest.
I need to take a nap.
And some orange juice and
Some food and some hugs. I need aftercare after this. Oh, there's a song called Heuristics for the Brain. That's exactly what we're going to play out as our playing out song.
cool.
Yeah. And thankfully we went through this. It was all bullshit. It sucks. I accurately labeled this episode The Pits because that's usually the one where the article is trash. And I thought quantum Darwinism was going to be good, but I named it The Pits anyway because I'm like, well, the pit is like the center of the thing. So because the expression The Pits means like bad
Well,
stuff.
there was the stuff about quantum
The beginning.
supremacy. That was good.
Yeah, so
I love that. That's good news, man.
Right. So the pits, the expression is bad stuff, but also you can see it as like getting to the core of the thing because it's at the center of the cherry, right? So we kind of did both. We started with getting to the center of how quantum computing can actually work, a reality check on quantum computing, which is fucking, yeah, it's happening. and
it's just not quantum woo woo.
Right. It's tiny computing is what they mean, not quantum theory computing. It's quanta computing. And then we had the pits of the terrible variety. I think I have cyanide poisoning. I need some time and space for my size. So okay, yeah, cool. We have a Patreon. You guys should check it out if you wanna.
If you'd like to sponsor more ranting about quantum bullshit.
Oh no, Spaceman,
No.
you just got here. Well, you might want to re-listen to all of this. It's gonna be a video that you can watch. And we raged for about an hour and 40 minutes, and another hour was awesome. So the first hour was great, and after that, it's just a lot of dumb stuff. But how do you explain it? But instantly. Yeah. About that.
Oh, actually, it's the idea that decoherence is that when things get bigger, they are they're coupled to the environment, so that's what makes them become
That's quantum Darwinism.
right. Quantum Darwinism. It's because of the fact that it's bigger, it's classical.
And there's replicas and stuff.
Yeah, it's because there's so many copies of a given particle, and that in the environment that are everything's coupled together, and because it's coupled together, it can't be in disagreement. And so, if it can't be in disagreement,
We have
across
classical properties.
all those copies, and poof, it's classical.
Yep, pretty much. That pretty much sums it up. So that's quantum Darwinism. In a nutshell, is their attempt to hold on to the quantum theory ideas while reconciling classical deterministic physics results that they get. So they're trying to find a way, and it's very confusing. I do not recommend, but that is essentially what they're doing. They are getting results over and over that indicate that the system is deterministic, that classical physics is where it's at, which is very much at odds with quantum theory, and they're trying to use the ideas of quantum theory to explain the classical results.
But it's not entirely classical. It's only neoclassical. That's
Right,
the problem. Is it's not
It's
actually
not Newton classical.
It's wave theory. That's the thing. Is it's wave theory. It's and there's chaotic determinism,
right.
not just determinism. So you're kind of
Sure.
you're kind of muddying the water a little bit there, because you have to be able to understand exactly what is meant by
there is
determinism.
nuance.
Because there are deterministic systems which are completely chaotic looking because there are too many inputs.
I just
to
mean
the variables,
deterministic, period.
and so therefore it requires a treatment. In other words, there's literally a requirement in the mathematical treatment of something that you use probability,
because it's too
but
large
the
of a system.
phenomena itself is not inherently probable.
And that's what I'm talking about.
Probabilistic.
That's why I'm using the word deterministic, is to specifically combat or to juxtapose with probabilistic.
I know, but if you say that out of context, you're fucked. You got to be able to bring up that there is the tools of probability are necessary to deal with
chaotic determinism.
Yes, but what's underneath the surface is deterministic. It just looks chaotic,
right? But the idea is essentially that the results they keep receiving is that the system works by itself without
it's
any...
mechanical, it's not magic.
Right, exactly.
It's mechanical, not magic. That's it.
It is logical too.
And it's rational.
Right,
there's no need for you to have faith and believe in the quantum woo-woo. You don't have to.
Right.
There's logical freaking explanations.
And that's what the results keep telling them, but they haven't given up on the quantum theory aspect, and so they keep trying to find new ways, new words, new theories.
Ways to keep sticking to the old orthodoxy that's been proven false in 1,000 fucking ways.
Exactly. And all they have to do is just embrace de Broglie-Bohm pilot wave theory, just go to fluid mechanics. It's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Let's just do that. But, one day. Soon, hopefully. So yeah, that's it for us. That's it. Explained it, but instantly. You're welcome. Consider checking us out on Patreon. If you especially like naked ladies, and particularly me, that happens at hardcore reward tier. But if you're not into naked stuff like that, you don't have to. There's beginner and challenger mode, where you can get in on lots of behind the scenes photo stuff. So if you're interested in any kind of photography, modeling, like lighting, like fun, just, observing the life of a model a little bit. And then of course that's beginner mode. There's polls and costume choices, a lot of like preview fun stuff on Discord, and there's Challenger mode, which I do recommend because it gives you the after show option. We do frequently have after shows to discuss the topic with our viewers. And sometimes we've started this cool thing that I really like where we discuss a brand new article, something that hasn't been revealed to the general audience. It is exclusive to our patrons, and we have a private exclusive discussion, and then it gets also recorded and put up as supplementary material on Patreon. So all of that's available for Challenger mode, and then of course, if you want to get all the nudie goodies, hit up Hardcore and Higher. There is a monthly photo set that we do at the heroic tier, and this month it's actually non-nude. So this one time ever, probably this 1 month in December, you actually get to experience a monthly photo set that doesn't feature nudity. For those of you who are more into lewdness and teasing and that sort of stuff, this is your month. Come on in, join us. It's still a very scandalous set because it's
We're scandalous people, by God.
yeah. And of course, there are exclusive Discord rewards and roles for patrons. It's secret rooms that only you guys get access to. But the Discord is free and available for everyone. It is a mosh pit, what we call a safe space for offensive people. So please do join us there if you are likewise an offensive person, or might just want to dip your toe in a mosh pit of ideas once in a while. So all of that's available in the description down below. You will also see that we post public posts on Patreon of every one of these shows. So the CherrySTEM podcast series discussions, they are available for you here on YouTube as a playlist, but they're also available in audio format for free for everyone on patreon.com/AnnaCherry. Click on posts, public posts, that'll be there. There's a CherrySTEM hashtag, and the benefits of that is you get a audio download, so you can listen to the audio anywhere you go by downloading it. Don't have to stream. And also, I include references. The articles that we discuss, any supplementary materials. There's a lot of extra information there if you're interested. And of course, we have over 30 of these discussions under our belt. And there's a lot of really fun stuff to peruse there. So check all
I really
that out.
recommend the Jordan Peterson article that we did over 4 episodes.
It was 4 episodes. It's a 4-parter. It was a for those of you who are interested in psychology, meaning, neuroscience, AI, even anything relating to systems of living systems, like how do creatures that crawl on this planet.
How does thought occur?
Right.
Jordan Peterson's
Yeah.
all about neuroscience, and it's the basis of how does thought occur? How does thought occur as a system?
Yes. How does thought, input of the environment, and thought as a result of it. So very, very, very good stuff there. I'm quite a fan of that. It's a 4-parter, and we also
because we go over his actual paper, which
Right.
is fucking fantastic.
really good paper. This was Jordan Peterson in 2013 or so, 2011, 2013, somewhere in there. And it's actually part of it's an opening chapter of a book on psychology, psychology of meaning textbook. So really good stuff there. For those of you who are fans of Jordan Peterson, definitely recommend that episode, and I will try to remember to add our the first in the series of that right here, right now at 2:49. So yell at me in the comments if I didn't add a card that is showing up in the upper right hand corner, telling you to go check out the rest of the Jordan Peterson stuff. So yell at me in the comments if I forgot. Alrighty, I believe this is it for us. Thank you again for watching, listening, what have you. And we will see you next Monday for a bit of a lighter episode. Those of you who are into pop science or news or like new stuff that is, a lighter episode. We're not gonna go into deep details about stuff. We're just kind of go over. It's called News Seed, where we sort of sprinkle
the fertile ground with seeds of things that are coming out, and there's some really cool stuff that I been finding and saving for us to talk about, such as a fun new word, tensegrity. That's gonna be interesting. I'm looking forward to introducing some of these concepts and news to you guys. So definitely check us out next week. Follow, subscribe, whatever the shit you gotta do or don't do. Don't matter to me. We're here on Mondays, except when we're not. And there are occasional updates to this YouTube channel, I swear. There's a Let's Play video coming at some point, like me playing a new game, too, actually. I popped my cherry with The Witcher and Far Cry Primal. That's happening at some point. And there's also more photo shoot vlogs at some point. So, yeah. This channel's not dead, I swear. It's not just a CherrySTEM channel, I promise. One day, you shall receive a proper video. But until then, support us on Patreon, because by golly, we could use it. And thank you again for listening, and we will see you next week.